The work session of the Board of Trustees of the Spring Independent School District is officially called to order on Tuesday, March 8th, and the time is now 6:06 p.m. Board of Trustees that are present is Trustee Winfred Adams, Carmen Correa, Kelly Hodges, Justine Durant, and Natasha McDaniel. I would ask that everyone please turn off and silence any of your cell phones or electrical devices. Thank you. Make sure mine's off. Okay. The first order of business is a review of the minutes from our previous meetings. Do any board members have any changes or corrections to the minutes of February 6th regular board meeting and February 28th special called session? Any changes or corrections? No, none. These items will be submitted as part of the consent agenda for our March 22nd Board of Trustees regular board meeting. Our next item is the superintendent's remark. And at this time, I will now recognize our superintendent of schools, Dr. Lapita Hinojosa.
Thank you, Ms. Durant. And I'd like to absolutely welcome everyone that's here tonight. We do have lots of campus staff members as well as students and parents. So just really excited that we have them with us. And I have to say that as we get closer to spring break, I want to make sure that we express our gratitude and thanks to all of our employees in Spring ISD for all of their work, dedication, commitment on behalf of our students. Also to our parents, their support has been unending, and especially as it relates to our safety and security of our children. We as a district appreciate our parents and their understanding as we move forward through this uncertain times, but want to express thanks to them. I also want to say that as a board, we've continued to visit our communities and go out to visit our churches, homeowners association, meeting with different organizations. And so we had the opportunity to go to Hosanna Church right across the street and had the opportunity to see and participate as part of their Black History program. And I think Mr. Adams would agree, we learned a lot. And really, as we closed out Black History Month, really acknowledging that Black history is our history, and it is what we celebrate every single day. And then finally, also big thank you to the support of the fraternity. We were out also this past weekend with the Alphas and just really appreciate the support that they continue to give our students. And we have lots of things that we want to celebrate. So I will keep all my comments for next Tuesday when we come back on March 22nd after spring break. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hinojosa. The next item is agenda participation. This item allows members of the public an opportunity to speak on agenda items before those items are considered by the Board of Trustees. So, Mr. Binkley, do we have anyone registered to speak for agenda participation this evening?
No, Madam President, we do not.
All right, thank you. Then for our next agenda item, I'd like to recognize our Chief of Financial Officer, Ann Westbrook.
Good evening, President Durant and members of the board, Dr. Hinojosa. This evening, we're going to take our first look at our budget process and just see where we are. If I could share my screen here in just a moment. So as soon as we return back from the holiday break in January, that's the official kickoff of the budget season for the district. As we are a June 30th fiscal year in. So we go hard into the process just as soon as we get back in January, starting with our projected student enrollment. So we start seeing what our student enrollment is going to look like, and we start developing our budget from that point. So the first thing here is just to note that as with all decision-making that's happening in the district, and especially with our budget, we keep the district's six strategic priorities as top of mind. And so the strategic priorities drive the budget process, and our expenditures are tied back to those strategic priorities. So as we work through this spring semester and we work through this budget process, we'll continually see the alignment with our expenditures tied back to those strategic priorities. So that'll be our framework as we go throughout this process. Right now, what we're in the middle of is gathering all of our information, gathering our data. So we began our budget staffing meetings with our principals last week. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we start with our enrollment projections. Once we receive our enrollment projections, then we begin developing our budget staffing templates that show our campuses exactly how many staff members, how many FTEs that they'll have, and how much money they'll have available for resources. And so we start meeting one-on-one with our principals, and that's a collaborative effort between human resources, the school leadership team, and of course, our financial services team, all coming together around the table with our school campus leaders to go over those numbers. They have an opportunity to ask any questions, allocate their staffing based on their campus needs, and allocate their funds based on their campus needs as well. So those meetings are well underway, and we're typically spending a full day. We just have several meetings that are happening throughout that day. We're continuing our zero-based budgeting process with our departments. However, as we recall from last fiscal year, we started the year off with a cut across the board with our departmental budgets of 5%. So for 21-22, our campuses received a budget with a top budget that they could request that was 95% of the 2021 budget. And the same is true again for 22-23. They're receiving a budget that is again 95% of 21-22. So that means that's about a 10% overall cut to our departmental budgets. Now, that's not to say that there are definitely some uncontrollable costs that we'll have, and we have to allocate and prioritize for those costs that we know are happening. And a good example of that is gas prices. So gas prices are impacting all of us personally, and it also impacts the district budget. So that's an uncontrollable cost that we have to allocate funds for and work that into the prioritization of the funds that are available. And of course, we're continuously working on creating our revenue estimates based upon that projected student enrollment. And then we'll talk about it a little bit more in just a moment, but also, of course, based upon our student attendance, which has been, if nothing but a challenge over the last year. And so throughout the budget process, throughout this time that we're in, which is continuously throwing lots of variables at us, we're continuing to review, and then we'll adjust throughout the budget process and be prepared to bring a recommendation to the board for final adoption in June.
So can I ask a question? And you may have already asked, and I was sitting here, but we're looking at 5% reduction at departments, not campuses.
Correct.
Okay. And then with the pandemic and the sign of the times and everything that's happening right now, is that really realistic? I would think they would need more, not less.
It's realistic in many cases where we can shave where we can shave. But then, as I mentioned, with the gas prices and with some costs that are related to COVID that are continuing, then we're setting aside funds for that purpose. But where we can shave, we are shaving from the budgets.
And what we will do, very similar as Ms. Westbrook has said, every school is coming through and they're having their discussions. We're not cutting any amounts from the schools. They're remaining whole and we're addressing their needs. For the departments, we've asked for a 5% cut, and we'll have the opportunities to have individual meetings. So if there are any specific needs like this uncontrollable cost, I can see that happening in some of the departments that do transport students, that will make those exceptions. And of course, you'll see it at the end with all of our budgets as you get your big binder. But we will have one-on-one discussions with each chief and go through their budget department by department.
And I'd like to state for the record that trustee Newhouse joined us at 6:15. Welcome.
So here's a look at some of what we're using to develop the budget right now. And so first and foremost is our projected enrollment. And so our projected enrollment based upon information that we've received from our internal research and accountability team, as well as working with our demographers at Templeton Demographics. We have that projected enrollment at 33,537, which is about 0.5% above our October snapshot of 33,300 students, which for all intents and purposes is flat. We're considering it to be flat enrollment. But is important to note here is that even though we're flat compared to the year before, we're still about 2,000 students below where we were at the start of the pandemic in the 2019-20 school year. So we're continuing all efforts to recoup our students. We're still working with the attendance walks and all those things to try our best to get our students back into spring. But we are adjusting based on our current reality, which is the number of students that we have right now. And then, of course, attendance is something that we've talked about a lot throughout this school year. And as we mentioned, it's not unique to spring, but it does create a significant challenge, as we know that our budget, over 50% of the revenue that we bring in is state aid, and it's based upon our student attendance. And so for our first 6 weeks of the year, we started the year off at about 89% attendance. Whereas in a normal year, we would have been somewhere between 95 and 96% in the first 6 weeks of the school year. So going into the second 6 weeks, the third 6 weeks, and we've gotten first blush at the fourth 6 weeks, we're still about 91%. So around this time of year, we would be closer to about 94.5% attendance. So that's a significant decrease in our overall attendance. And as I mentioned, not unique to spring. This is a discussion that's happening across the state with superintendents, with CFOs, with the commissioner, and it's something that will have to be addressed. We know that there are some potential stop gaps in place for us to help with funding this year, but we did receive a caution, which is eventually we'll have to start operating with the funding that's available based upon our current reality. So we're planning, but that's where the challenge comes in, because do we go all the way to 91%, which would have an even more significant impact on our budget, or do we plan to get a little closer, hoping that things will get better and our students will start coming to school more in this next fiscal year? So that's the challenge right now, developing our revenue estimates. But either way, we are anticipating having a budget deficit this year, similar to the budget deficit we had last year. And so we'll talk much more in depth as we start to see numbers at our next budget workshop. So with that said, moving to the expenditure side is the staffing. And we know that staffing makes up over 86% of the district's budget. And so we're building our campus-based staffing based on our current approved staffing guidelines. As always, when we're developing our budget, we're taking a conservative approach. And so an example of a conservative approach is with our campuses. So say, for example, we're looking at a kindergarten class, and we have 4 teachers in kindergarten. And based on our projected enrollment, our classrooms with those same 4 teachers with next year's projected enrollment will put our classes at 22, 22, 21, 21. in years past, in years that weren't quite as lean as they are now, we would speak with the principal and they said, well, we've got an apartment complex coming in over there. We've got some parents saying they're bringing their kids from that weren't here for pre-K, so on and so forth. And we may have been so inclined to add a teacher and say, okay, that's a good argument. We'll go ahead and add the teacher, because if you do get 3 or 4 more students, you would have classrooms over 22. This year, the conservative approach would be, we're going to hold you at the 22, 22, 21, 21. We're going to hold, you're not losing a teacher, you're going to keep the 4 teachers. And then we'll see what happens when we get into the school year, we get into leveling. So that's the conservative approach. That conversation would look a little bit differently if we were slated to lose a teacher, right? So taking a conservative approach, but also keeping our campus needs top of mind at the same time. So it's a balancing act. Is there a question? Okay, and then the last thing to note here is, because we're in a budget deficit and we're anticipating a budget deficit, we're focusing our attention on modeling out some retention and recruitment stipends to bring forward to the board for consideration. And as always, we'll still model out the cost of a pay increase, but we know pay increases are recurring costs. And so that could exacerbate the budget situation. So we'll bring both options forward, but we're certainly leaning towards and recommending retention and recruitment stipends that we can utilize funding that we have currently available to have an impact, make sure that our employees are taken care of for the year, but without necessarily committing the district to that recurring cost.
Do we have any line of sight to retention and recruitment stipends being offered in our neighboring districts?
Yes. We have heard of several. I think we've seen a couple that are out there, which of course gives us an opportunity when we've seen what's being offered by others. Our human resources team has also done some work, and they've come forward with some recommendations based on what they're seeing and what they're hearing in the field. So we're taking all of that into consideration and plan to bring forward something that we think would be substantial enough to reach our goals.
It would be great when you bring that to us, that you bring, what our
The surrounding-
competition's doing.
Yes.
We don't want to lose teachers.
And that is a big emphasis for us. We have amazing teachers, amazing school leaders, and we want them to stay with us. And it is important. They've gone through the difficult times with us. And so to be able to provide a retention stipend to let them know, number one, their value. We appreciate their work. We see them and we want them to stay with us. So Ms. Westbrooks, as well as Dr. Hill, coming together, seeing what other districts are doing, but also proposing what we believe is a recognition and supporting our current staff.
I've got a question on the enrollment. Do we have a good grasp on, because we're in the second semester of this year, and I know we've done the walks and we've done everything possible to try to get our students back in, but do we have a good grasp on what's left? Are these students that have just kind of dropped out of the system altogether? Do we know where they are?
That's the $1 million question across the state, is where are the students? Because we're not necessarily seeing them show up in other districts like we would in the past. We would see the students left us and they went over to a neighboring district, or they went over to a neighboring charter school. That's not what we're seeing right now. Some of it, yes, but certainly not enough to make up for the 2,000 students that were down.
I seem to recall that while we were going through this and when we first started losing kids, the speculation and data was that they were the younger kids. They were the pre-K, K, and first grade kids whose parents were keeping them home. And so I sort of had the expectation that once everything was safer, that we would get this big sort of jump because those kids would be back in our buildings. And so it's curious to me that now that we're sort of getting clear, we don't know where the kids are, like across the state, like where are these kids? So I'll be interested to hear more about, what we're doing to find them.
And that's something, Ms. Westbrooks, I know that our team is looking at, as far as our counts, because you're absolutely right. It was the pre-K through first grade that we saw a decline in our enrollment, as well as the high school students. And so we will definitely, with Dr. Perez and Dr. Olivo that oversee that, we want to be able to start tracking, are they starting to trickle back? One of the things that we've seen and just talking to other superintendents, so many of our high school students have taken on jobs and are just entering the workforce. The little ones are the ones that, as our parents start seeing, that it is safe to come, we hope to, get them back into school. We will be kicking off our early childhood, our pre-KK roundup. And that's going to start bringing some excitement back in. And also us visiting the community centers and just churches and letting everyone know it is safe to come back. And we've got, space in our schools. But we will look at our enrollment counts and see if there's been any shifts in that pre-K through first. And then, of course, the high school, because we lost them at the two ends.
Right. It's especially concerning because, well, all this talk about learning loss and like closing this gap. So these kids are out of the system. And when we do get them back eventually, even if it takes a little bit longer, they'll be even further behind than their peers who are behind, who are in our buildings right now. And so it's a big worry for me. And I don't see a solution for anybody. I'm just speculating out
I'm
loud.
wondering too, I know throughout the pandemic, homeschooling went up. Are we able to track that at all and determine students that may have went into homeschooling?
The state does have homeschooling if our parents are using the state provided organization. So we can certainly look at the numbers also in our area. Many parents do not report to the state and do not, get the state's curriculum, but we can certainly look at that area as well as the charters, right? So just looking all around us. But it is as if they've become invisible, like 2,000 students, where are they?
If we can slice and dice that 2,000 into specific categories, then we can, plan our strategy around how to get them back. But we need to really understand where they are and who they are at this point.
Are the schools like, what is it, Texas Connections Academy, is that considered a charter school as well? Okay.
It is a charter, and I have to tell you, Texas Connection is overflowing. I mean, they serve the entire state. So.
Okay, so the next slide I know is fairly small. Hopefully you can see it a little bit better from your seats. Maybe not, but we do have a larger version of it that we can share. But what I wanted to point out here is just that this is our current 21-22 approved staffing guidelines, and this is what we're basing our campus allocations on. And so that the biggest thing to point out here is with our elementaries, 22-1 pre-K through fourth grade, 25-1 in fifth grade. And then at our middle schools, we're staffing with a ratio of 28-1. And of course, we start with 33-1 and we use our state comp ed funding to bring us down to a net 28-1 ratio at the middle school.
Ms. Westbrook, how does student-based budgeting impact this?
We have not implemented student-based budgeting as a district just yet. There are components of student-based budgeting, and you'll see it with some of the allocations here, like the ESL allocation, those sorts of things, but we have not, as a district, begun to implement student-based budgeting just yet.
Okay.
Where are we with it and what are our barriers?
I believe we just need to work on designing it a bit more. And we have a third party that we work with who is the same company that we work with for Opportunity Culture. And so it is I think it's in year 5 of our plan to work with them. So it's one of those that's like turning a ship in order to move from our current to that. So we have pieces and components that we're building towards it. And you'll see that a little later with Opportunity Culture, but we're not full-fledged with student-based budgeting just yet. It's the planning and developing phase that we're in right now. Okay, and so this is a look at the high school staffing, again, small, but the classrooms for high schools is at 33-1. But we also have additional staffing where they receive 10 at-risk additional teachers, 24 CTE teachers. The state comp ed pays for those at-risk teachers. And then, of course, we've got our ROTC and PVA program that's above and beyond the staffing as well.
So don't we have some district of innovation opportunities with staffing?
Yes, District of Innovation would allow us to have, like, for example, with elementary, where there's the state mandated requirement of 22-1 in pre-K through fourth. Our District of Innovation actually would allow us to go higher with our student teacher ratio, more students in the classroom without filing a TEA waiver. But right now, we're holding true to the state mandated ratios.
Do we think we need to be looking at any of these ratios as we look at the slide our students are experiencing right now?
In terms of lowering the student teacher ratio?
So that definitely is always something that we looked at. And remember, this year, we actually used our ESSER funds to allocate additional teachers, and we call them interventionists because we really, while we want to lower the class size, we believe that it's important for the students to get their very specific needs met. And so we want the students to be pulled out and have those services directly impacting them instead of just lowering the class size and everybody gets the same thing. So with the 4 interventionists at elementary and middle school, it allows the principals to lower the class size during certain times of the day where the children are being pulled out for additional support. And that's really the strategy that we've used this year with our ESSER funds to be able to provide that targeted, specific interventions for the students.
In addition to the teacher that was provided on top of the interventionist positions, that each campus was given the ability to utilize that FTE based on their individual campus needs. And in some cases, they have used it to create specialized rotations or to bring the class sizes down in some grade levels.
So that's a great strategy we used. Is it working? And is it the right approach as we look at next year's budget when we know we're going to have kids coming back that are behind? So how effective was it currently? And is it still the right approach for next year? And if not, while we're having this budget discussion, this is where we need to be talking about the change.
This is a really good and timely discussion because you are going to see our middle of the year data and be able to see what we are seeing and what the schools are seeing right here, right now, and how our students are performing. You'll also see the strategies that we are using. So a little too early to tell if the interventionists are, getting the lift that we need. One of the pieces, and there's several principals in the audience, one of the pieces that we said with our ESSER teachers, the interventionists, is that we need to track. We need to give them set expectations and goals for us to be able to determine, are they making a difference? The students that they're servicing, is it just pull out for pull out sake? Or, did we give that interventionist specific students with specific targets, and are they meeting the targets? Because we need to be able to come back and say, is it working? Or do we need to repurpose those 4 interventionists and say they become something else, based on the work that we're seeing. So today you'll see some of the work from the principals as a response to the middle of the year. We have another test coming up, and so we'll keep tracking because at the end of the day, the needle has to move for our students. It's a good strategy. We want to make sure that that strategy is effective.
Right, and we don't want to spend a lot of time in it when it's not. We have to be able to quickly pivot when we need to.
We do see some of that pivoting happening when we're meeting with our principals right now. We're asking, how are you using your ESSER teacher position? And there are several that are changing how they're using it based on what they've learned this year. And they are doing that pivoting for next year.
What is the cliff for the ESSER funds based on the model that we have right now?
And that's another discussion that we're having in every single meeting is, are we doing the long-term planning for when those positions go away? And so we have ESSER 3 through 2024. We are hearing, we just came back from a finance conference with Texas Association of School Business Officials, and we are hearing, starting to hear that that may get extended. But even if it's not extended, we have other ways to make sure that we get the full use of the funds. But right now, they're slated to expire in 2024. Okay, and so here is a look at equity, because we know that that is our foundational priority that we have. And through the equity study and the work of the equity committee, which has been brought forward to the board as a whole, some changes have been happening as a part of the budget process. And so the first thing to note is that through the allocations for the campuses, we have begun to add those at-risk counselors at the campuses. I think it was 4 campuses that were identified for this year to receive an at-risk counselor on their campus. In addition to, of course, we know that through the equity funds, we've also provided that service through the SIS program. We've changed the at-risk allocation at the elementaries because at secondary, there was already a per pupil allocation that was allocated to the campuses for things such as tutorial, after-school buses, those sorts of things. But at the elementary, we just had a flat amount. It was every single elementary got the same amount. And so that's not equitable. And so with this equity lens and the guidance that the questions and guidance that we continue to receive from you as a board, that was an opportunity item for us. And so we changed this calculation to a per student calculation based on the number of at-risk students at the campus. And so most campuses actually saw a bump in their funding that was available to them to go towards tutorials or instructional materials, or if they want to provide and are able to provide after-school buses. So that's just our change in thinking of ensuring that we are providing funds in a more equitable way and not just the one size fits all allocations based on level. And I mentioned earlier the ESL per student allocation, which is $1,100 per ESL student. And that helps our principals, to Ms. Durant's point, or excuse me, President Durant's point about the funding being available to bring class sizes down. With our campuses that have a large ESL population, like at our high schools, they may have 6 additional teachers that they're able to get through this allocation that allows them to bring their class sizes down even more. So that's an opportunity to service that population and to help out. And then the last item of note is the opportunity culture, which Dr. Harris presented to the board back in the fall about the new opportunity culture model. So the campuses have been identified. And so with them, they'll be able to stretch the reach of our best teachers through the MCL, the multi-classroom teacher leader model. And so that's our first step towards expanding this program to our campuses. So we're really excited about that. And of course, that will certainly help us get more excellent and equitable outcomes in our classrooms as well. And so the last thing I wanted to mention here are just some dates that are coming up. So our campus budget staffing meetings are going pretty quickly, and our last one is scheduled for March 23rd. At the April 7th budget workshop is when we'll bring the first blush of numbers to you all, so you can see where we are, what challenges we have, and start receiving guidance on how to shape the budget between now and the adoption. And of course, we know that we're always waiting on our property value estimates to see what's happening with our property taxes. So we'll receive that from Harris County Appraisal District on or before April 30th. And then based on that information, we'll do our truth in taxation calculation, and we're required to put that tax rate estimate in the Chronicle by June 4th with an anticipated adoption of the budget on June 14th. So just an overview of where we are and an introduction to let the board know that the budget process is well underway. And we will definitely be back with much more information to share in the coming months. Thank you.
For the record, I'd like to announce that Dr. Deborah Jensen joined us at 6:41 PM. Welcome. Thank you, Ms. Westbrook. For our next item, I'd like to recognize our Chief of Schools, Dr. Miguel Perez.
Good evening, Board of Trustees, Board President, Dr. Hinojosa. So tonight, we will be providing an update on the 2021-2022 middle of the year student achievement. And while I call Dr. Jennifer Koff to the podium to provide us with the presentation of the data, I'm going to talk about a little bit about the process and how we start and where we're at. And then we'll talk about some of the response and the actual report that we're providing to campuses. So we have a beginning of the year, which is known as a BOY, and then the middle of the year, all the students engage in the MOY process, which different grade levels, they take different assessments. These assessments are actually proctored via the computer system, and some are done with a 1-to-1 ratio, where the teacher is actually pulling the student and working with the scholar and asking them rapid fire questions, and they're assessing their actual learning. And so a part of this norm reference assessment is that the beauty about this is that students and families are able to see the growth from the beginning as they come in to the middle to the end. And so that's part of where we as the educators then look at the identified needs and then determine what else do we need to provide to the scholars moving forward. Dr. Cobb, I'll let you begin the presentation on some of the data, and then we'll take over with some of the response and support.
Good evening, President Durant. Can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay. Good evening, President Durant, Board of Trustees, Dr. Hinojosa, members of Cabinet. Tonight, we're going to go over, my part of this presentation will be going over the middle of year student assessment data, which will include NWEA math that we administer in grades 3 through 8 for reading and grades K through 8 for math, and also including this year, we have high school with some subjects being tested for reading and math. In class for K2 reading, and then circle for pre-K. So first off, we're going to start off with MAP growth. So MAP growth is a norm reference test that measures achievement and growth. It's a normed group that's normed at the national level and includes 10 million students in the norm reference study. Similar to how we report and talk about STAR, we're going to be looking at achievement and then growth. And you'll see this throughout the all the assessments that we are looking at today, is that we'll first talk about achievement, which is just performance. And then growth is how much growth are we seeing of the students between BOY, beginning of year, to middle of year, or middle of year last year to middle of year this year. So starting off with MAP, reading and math achievement, this is the percent of on or above grade level. So as I said earlier, you won't see performance for kinder through second because we actually use MClass and MClass for K through second. But in math, we do administer the assessment to students kindergarten through 8th grade. So what you are seeing here is the achievement of what's considered, there's a below grade level, above grade level, and on grade level. So that in the wrong order. But what you have reported here is the on or above grade level percentages at BOY and then at MOY. And similar to, I saw you just last month with the table report, we have headlines for many of our slides here. So I'm going to, I'll read those as we go along. So 3 out of every 5 students were on or above grade level in MAP reading, and over half of the students were on or above grade level in MAP math. The percentage of students in grades 3 through 5 who scored on or above grade level increased for MAP reading and math. That previous look, just to make sure they look kind of, the slides look similar. The previous slide was beginning of year to middle of year. So this one is middle of year to middle of year. So the middle of year of 2021, and we were going over this presentation today, and Dr. Hinojosa reminded us that middle of year last year also included at-home administration. So it was an interesting time. So, you know, you may have heard or seen parents on the side helping and assisting, and we appreciate that, but it does skew the testing a little bit, where all of MOY testing this year did occur at the campus. So the percentage of students in grades 4, 5, and 8 who scored on or above grade level increased for MAP reading, and on MAP math, it's very difficult to say, the percentage of students who scored on above grade level increased in 4th grade. So this again is again achievement data, but it's a different look at the data. So the way that MAP is measured, it's called a RIT score. A RIT score is similar to, or it is a scale score. RIT stands for Roush Unit, and Roush is the founder of that scale score. I remember last year somebody quizzed me on that, and it just, that name escapes me every time. So to kind of walk you through this
I'm
chart.
sorry, can I stop you a minute? Because I don't know if it's me. On the previous slide,
Yes,
is grade K through 8 the average?
so it's the percentage that are on or above grade level.
And under, from reading, it went to 62 at the beginning to 60 at the middle. So that's a decrease.
Yes,
Okay,
Right.
but the narrative says it increased.
I'm making which grade level you're looking at.
Okay, I was looking at the overall. I thought the bottom line was an average. But if you look at the individual grade levels, we have 3 that went up and 3 that went down.
Correct. Oh, I'm sorry. The narrative is speaking to those individual grade levels. It wasn't speaking to the overall. But yes, to what you're seeing, yes. In math, there was a decrease. And then in reading, you see there's just a slightest of increase.
Yeah, that's not tracking for me.
See the opposite, yeah.
Look at page 4, slide 4, the beginning of the year to middle of the year, I think is where we are.
I'm sorry, I had slide 5 up, slide 4. Okay. So yes, from K to 8, there was a decrease in reading, and in math from in K to 8, there was a decrease as well.
So that slide, is that just a typo?
The heading says grades 3 to 5. Is that
Yes,
what you're
it's
talking
grades 3
about?
through, yes, it's not
Right.
the K to 8, it's just the 3 through 5.
3 through 5 went up.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
And I was gonna wait until we got through it, but since we're already here, do we know what the drop is between 5th and 6th grade? Because on slide 4 and on slide 5, we see increases 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and then we get to 6th grade and there's a drop every time in both subjects.
So you're going to see that throughout, and there historically there has been a drop. There's even often there is a drop even in STAR from 5th grade to 6th grade. And so that is historically that has happened, but also expectations are a little bit different. You know, the way classrooms are set up, and also the rigor is different between 5th and 6th grade. So that's a pattern that you see nationally that tracks. You will see, just to kind of preview where we're going, you'll see that we did really well in grades 3 through 5, and then middle school is not so good. So what you're seeing will run throughout the rest of the presentation. Yes.
I'm still struggling with, so with what the narrative says
Narrative's not correct.
and then what the numbers say, and they don't go together.
They don't.
Could you read what the
The
narrative
narrative
says?
says that the percentage of students in grades 3 through 5 who scored on or above grade level increased for MAP reading and math. So even if you throw out for reading, like, so there's no data for,
Okay, you're on MOY.
I'm
uh,
on BOY to MOY. The very,
The percentage of students, it starts off, or the percentage of students in grades 3 through 5?
right.
The narrative doesn't support the numbers, but we can get that corrected.
Well, I'm looking at grades 3 through 5 and they do increase. We're going BOY to MOY. The percentage of students in grades 3 through 5 who scored on or above grade level increased for map reading and.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm looking at so I was looking at 3 through 8. Okay.
I also had a question. Since this is norm referenced and it's referenced to millions of kids across the nation, could we interpret this that our kids are not increasing in achievement at the rate other kids in the nation are?
So
It doesn't mean they've lost knowledge. It just
Correct.
means in comparison to other kids, they haven't increased as much.
right, right. So what you are seeing is that, and we're progressing that way, but what you will see is that the performance of our students, we're actually this is higher for some of our grade levels than it has been previously. However, our average is, and we're going to get to the slide, is just the target is hitting right at on grade level. However, you'll see that what is underneath that is a large percentage of students below grade level. So the average is going right to the target of being on or above grade level, but you have a lot underneath. So what you will see achievement wise, achievement wise, like just actual performance, our students are in the lower percentiles of performance. However, when we get to the growth part, you'll see, and it depends on the grade level, depends on the subject, there is growth occurring. And it doesn't mean, to your point, that growth is not occurring at all. It's just supposed to be occurring based on the norm, how everybody else, how they normed the data, what is expected to be the growth that you go from semester to semester.
Okay, just to be sure, I'm interpreting this correctly.
Yes.
For instance, grade 3, beginning of the year, 56.6%. That means that our students, in comparison to those millions of students, seem to be right in the middle of the group. It doesn't mean that they only got 56.6% of the
No.
items right or anything like
No,
that.
that
It's
means
just
that they
their
just hit the
achievement in comparison to other kids.
They hit a marker, they hit on grade level.
In comparison to other students in the country with no differentiation when you look at socioeconomics, when you look at all of this. I mean, this is students across the nation that are participating in this and not taking into account, we're not comparable schools, right? Our districts look different than those that are in that big set. So yes, it is a norm reference across the country with all types of students and types of school districts.
And if I may add, right, so when the students come into the start of the school year, they take the BOY, which is the beginning of the school year, right? As we walk through the middle of the year, the students have to be at a certain pace, right? So this is based on what you just mentioned, right? Out of 10 million kids, where would your typical student be at that moment, at that time? This slide is only looking at the percentage of students that are on or above grade level. Then we have the other measures of growth. Are the scholars growing at the same rate, and at what rate are they growing? Because if I come in as a third grader and I'm supposed to be here, right, and over the course of time I need to be here, then you have your above and you're on grade level and above, but then how much am I growing? So we're measuring different pieces. This one solely focuses on or above, and then to your point, in the next coming slides, you will see the growth from this point to that point. In our cases here, you will see that the students as they come in, they're here and they're ending up at the middle of the school year, which means that 59% of the third graders are at the on or above grade level as a percentage.
Okay. I guess I was thinking about this in terms of percentiles and I shouldn't have.
So you're gonna, when we get to growth, that is actually kind of measuring percentile. So if I'm the 50th percentile, am I in the 50th percentile again for the next measure?
Okay, that's why I was confused.
So
Yes.
I don't, sorry, I don't want to beat this to death, but back to this drop between fifth and sixth grade.
Yeah.
I know if we know that this is something that happens on a national scale, are we doing anything to help, I guess, ease that shift? Is that something that we focus on? Because if our kids are already behind as it is, and we know that they're going to be even more behind going from fifth to sixth grade, are we doing anything at that period to try to help lessen that drop?
So to answer the question, yes. Have we figured out the magic formula to make sure that we got it right? We have not yet. But what I can tell you is that in fifth grade, remember, students either stay in one classroom or they work with two teachers or three teachers. Once they transition to middle school, now a student, right, a young man or young woman has to now go from class to class to class, be able to be with a variety of now different teachers, different subject areas. And so that transition is both academically, but also social and emotionally. And then you have the behavior component, right? So putting all those three buckets together, what are we doing? We are doing a variety of things. One, we do have the Springway systems and routines, which allows all the schools, all the teachers to make sure that as they're teaching the content, that we're able to focus on the how we teach it. And that's one area that we can definitely grow, but we're making a lot of strides because we do have a large number of our teachers are in the first to the 5 years of experience, right? So we're working on providing professional development to the teachers. Secondly, when it comes to the social emotional piece, right, we have actually something that's called Seven Minds, which provides the students, the teachers provide this to the kids, to provide them actual curriculum to help them understand conflict management, but at the same time, how to deal and manage with all these different courses along the way. And then finally is the piece about discipline, right? You have the students who potentially have a lot of hormones going on, and so they can't control themselves, and we're working through them to look at restorative practices where what we don't want is a student to just be suspended or to be disciplined, but allowing the teacher to focus on diffusing some of these behaviors while at the same time being able to teach the student the proper way on how to behave so that the student can remain in the classroom, working with habits of homework, right? Working with habits of studying, habits of making sure that I'm taking notes, habits of making sure that we're allowing the scholars the opportunity for them to ask questions during the class. And so there's a lot of components, and then we do have a lot of systems in place to help them. And then finally is we've got programs, and I'm getting ahead of the response piece, but I think it's
I
important.
was going to ask Dr. Bettis to hold because we do have our staff here and even a middle school student that's here. So we're going to hold, we're going to allow Dr. Cobb to go through the data, and we want to answer all your questions, but also know that we've got principals, we've got teachers, we've got coaches that are here, and actually a student that's here.
We have two middle school students for that very
Middle school.
reason, right? And so, so
One
we will
here.
be able to ask them, hey, what else do you need, and how can we get better? So.
I believe I covered this slide already, but just to make sure. I'm just gonna read the headline on this one. So this one, again, it was MOY to MOY, remembering that 2021's MOY was an unusual administration and setting. Also to note, anytime we're looking at anything from 2021, also our participation rates were lower. Because we didn't have the same, they weren't with us. So if they were not participating, it was a little more difficult to get them on board. So the percentage of students in grades 4, 5, and 8 who scored on or above grade level increased for MAP reading. On MAP math, the percentage of students who scored on above grade level increased for 4th grade. So I believe this is where we left off. So this is a kind of a visual representation of what we were talking about. So we're still in the achievement look. So the way that you read this, so the orange line represents the target of being on grade level or higher. So what you have in the blue are the average RIT score. So that was the Roush unit that I was talking about, which is the scale score that we have for each grade level. And so, and then in the different gradations, you can see that the below grade level, and I think Dr. Jensen, this kind of speaks to what you were asking about the below grade level. You can see that a greater percentage of our kids are at that below grade level. However, after that is the on above and above. Unlike in previous administrations, this is the first time that we're having all of our grade levels on average hit on target. So you can see that the blue line is at the orange hash or above that. So that's kind of the long and short of that headline. So this is for reading grades 3 through 8. And then same kind of layout for the data, but for mathematics, with the blue line being the target, and the average MOI mathematics RIT scores for kindergarten, 3rd, 4th, and 8th were above target.
And so this is on average, our scholars are meeting their actual growth target for that piece.
Not growth.
The achievement, I'm sorry, from the RIT.
Yes. So taking a look at the same data, but now by subpopulation. So we have the reading achievement results by subgroup. So we have the reported here, all students, economically disadvantaged, special education, multilingual, and gifted and talented. So you have it at the district level and then by grade level. Students in the gifted and talented program were more likely to achieve the above grade level standard than students in the district overall on the MAP reading assessment. And looking at math, same look at the data, but now in the same subpopulations, elementary multilingual students and all gifted and talented students had higher percentages scoring on or above grade level than the district overall on the MAP mathematics assessment. So this, we'll now go into MAP growth. So when we are talking about growth, it's important to keep in mind that this is the growth by the individual student. So in order to be included in the analysis, they would have to be here at BOY and then MOY or MOY to MOY. So just keep that in mind, that where the achievement was everybody who took the test, were they on or above grade level? Now we're looking how much did the students grow? And to Mr. Adams, to kind of bringing out your point, this is where we're looking at, for example, a 50th, were they 50th percentile in, or let's say they were in BOY. Now are they 50th percentile in MOY, or did they decrease to like a 48th percentile, or are they at now 60th percentile? So the way this is calculated in MAP, it's called a conditional growth index, and it shows how student growth compares to the growth of other students nationwide. So they took those 10 million students and said, okay, a 50th percentile student, does they on average grow, or normed, they grow this much between the fall and the spring, or between MOY to MOY. And so what this allows is for growth comparisons to be made between students performing at different points of the achievement distribution across different grade levels and different subject areas. I promise not to bore anybody with statistics, but this is a Z-score for anybody who knows what that is. So a negative CGI means that the student has not met their growth projection. That does not mean they didn't grow. It just means if, for example, they went from the 50th percentile to the 48th percentile. That means they didn't meet their growth measure. However, the water is rising, and what is expected of them from the, as you would imagine, from the beginning of year to the middle of the year is different than what would be expected. Just it's not a steady measure. It's a rising measure of increased performance. So here we have the BOY to MOY from semester growth. So that's a semester's growth, remembering again that a 0 is that they, in that example, they stayed from 50th percentile to 50th percentile. Every child is a different percentile, but their expectation is that from BOY to MOY, they are at the same percentile, just with increased knowledge and standards growing. So for grades 3 through 5, or I'm sorry, 3 and 5, displayed above average growth on math reading assessment. I will say for grade 4 that is so close to 0, I'm going to say that they hit it pretty much. They grew on the nose. And then to Trustee Correa's question, this is where you're seeing in middle school that we are not seeing the same level of growth. Keeping in mind, again, that doesn't mean that they're not growing at all. They're just not growing at the expected pace that they should be at this point. Same look at the data, but now MOY to MOY, keeping in mind that the same caveats that we have said with the MOY data in 2021 still ring true, but we are seeing growth in 4th and 5th grade. They had an above average growth in reading, where 6th through 9th grade did not. They had below average. I will tell you for grade 9, we have piloted that the exam map in high school, and so this would have been the second time, BOY being the first time, the second time it's being administered. So there are quite honestly, there's growing pains to that. We're still working on the administration to get that to a solid point. So just to give you an idea, that's the only time I think you're going to see high school data, but that's mainly because it's mainly meant for subject areas rather than the entire 9th grade. So as an example, this is really only for English 1. Looking at math, same concept as before, but with mathematics, you'll see that we are showing growth in grades 3 through 5. We're showing a decrease between BOY to MOY in math in kinder through 2nd and 6th through 8th. And then going back to the MOY to MOY, we have below average on every grade level.
This MOY to MOY is the 21 school year.
Yes.
Correct.
to
Yeah, and I would, to the cautionary tale, especially for those younger grade levels, those would be the ones that probably are receiving the most assistance. Also keeping in mind, these are also the same children, going back to your projection and the budgeting questions, that may be in school for the first time. But since they're MOY to MOY, they'd have to have been in school, but they're more likely to have stayed home with that administration.
So I had actually asked that this be added, the MOI to MOI. This was my request, because I thought you all would want to see year over year and just not be beginning of the year to middle of the year. So I did ask that this be added. When I asked it, I didn't realize it's really not apples to apples.
Yes, but it is definitely going forward. It's still a good look at the data, because when we have 2 similar years, it's very telling for us.
I'm very pleased that you'll do this going forward. This first time with the pandemic, I just don't know how to judge things.
Right. And so I will put a pin in that, because there's something I want to tell you, but I'll wait till the star prediction part. I don't want to get ahead of myself, which I like to do as well. So the BOY to MOY met growth in reading. So these are, it's again by all students and by the subpopulations that we had before, but these are the percentages of students that met growth. So wherever their growth and whatever percentile they were in before in beginning of year to MOY, did they maintain that or grow above that? These are the percentages of students that did that. And the students in multilingual and gifted programs had more students meeting growth expectations than the district overall in the reading assessment.
Dr. Cobb?
Yes.
Can you go back to slide 15 for just a second?
Certainly.
So MOY to MOY means that the kids that were in grade 1 took the assessment in 2021, and then in 2022, they were in the 2nd grade.
No, they're in 1st grade now. They're in kinder the year before.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Going MOY to MOY, met growth, same analysis. Students in multilingual and gifted programs had more students meet growth expectations than the district overall on the math reading and assessment. I know I'm just rattling this off, but you will see that multilingual and gifted and talented are coming up quite a bit and has caused some positive conversations to see what we can learn from that and how we can further grow that growth. Now looking at BOY to MOY in mathematics, students in multilingual and gifted talented programs had more students meet grade expectations than the district overall on the mathematics assessment. I don't think we've, okay. I did not touch anything. Should I continue or should I wait? Okay, no problem. Okay, so for the students, and one thing that we've alluded to, but not really have said, what you remember in the mathematics performance when we were looking at taper, that our mathematics was Dr. Hinojosa's signals.
I had to say that Mike is amazing.
Yes.
So he got us right back. So we'll keep using this. If it goes out again, we'll use our
Okay,
handouts.
no problem. Okay, now again to MOY to MOY. I'll look at my screen. Students in multilingual and gifted and talented again had more students meeting MOY to MOY growth expectations in the district overall in math. So now we're going to step away from growth and look at STAR prediction. So what can MAP tell us about STAR? So one nice component about MAP is that it does have STAR predictive scores if the students take a BOY and an MOY. And it's we've actually done our own analysis, and it's about 95% accurate. So for us, that's this is our first leading indicator to determine how we're going to do on STAR. So what you have here is MOY compared to MOY's predictions of approaches, meets, and masters on STAR reading. Now you'll see that the approaches level is slightly higher, which is great, but the meets and masters have a little bit of decline. But for us, this was actually very positive news because this is the first time that we've seen something post-COVID to see that, okay, we are on track to where we have before, and not present here, but we did compare it to 2019. We're actually outpacing our predictive scores in 2019. So that gave us, in reading, that gave us a lot of hope that we are on the right track. And that also matches what you've seen with the other reading growth data that was in grades 3 through 5. In math, the story is also is what's somewhat similar, that we have a lower percentage of students that were predicted to reach the approaches grade level in the 2022 STAR math exam. And that it's also tracking similarly to what we saw in our taper data and other data that we have run so far. And then looking at the subgroups. So important to note here that this is all of our subgroup population for reading and math together, that this is, instead of having the approaches, meets, and masters, these are the percentage of students that are approaches or predicted to be approaches or above in reading and in math. And again, our gifted and talented students are predicted to be at a higher level at the 90, looking at those percentages at the third grade 3 through 8 at the 97.6 and 98.4%. All right, switching gears, we are going to M-CLASS now. So again, M-Class is administered in, it's the reading exam for K through 2. And this is our first year to do M-Class. Previously, we did TPRI and Tejas Lay, which both are Texas reading assessments. So now we've actually gone to a national assessment. So it's a different layout and a different configuration. It's based on a national standard, and it's more closely aligned with the science of reading. So just to give you briefly read just the top one, the dynamic indicators of basic early literacy skills, or DIBELS. English literacy assessment is a battery of short 1-minute fluency measures used with students through K through 2. And then EDEL, I had Dr. Hinojosa help me on that one, is the Spanish version of that exam. So this first look, similar to what we saw with math, this is achievement data. So less than half of all students in grades K through 2 scored on or above grade level on the M-Class early literacy assessment. So you see there the 50% line, and then kinder at 49, first at 45, second at 47, and then the aggregate of the 3 grade levels being 47. So again, looking at achievement, the on or above grade level for the subgroups. So multilingual students and gifted and talented students, even in this test, had higher percentages of students who scored on or above grade level compared to across the district on the M-Class MOI assessment. And you'll see as we're looking at the subgroup performance, it also does reflect what we have seen in the TAPER report as well last month. Okay. The way that this is looking at, the next measure is looking at growth. So growth right now is only available in English. And so you see that there's here in this graphic, there's 5 different categories of being well below average, average, and above average, and well above average. Sorry, that's a tongue tie. Across the district, 5 out of 8 students achieved above growth or higher on the M-Class assessment from the BOY to the MOI. So this is categorizing the level of growth that they had from BOY to MOI. And just as a reminder, this assessment is at the national level, where our TPRI and Tejas Lay that we had last year was based on Texas standards. And that's one reason why TEA switched the approved screeners, because they wanted more of a global look to the data. Okay, again, we're looking at growth. So this is the percent above growth for the subpopulation. So again, our frequent flyers, multilingual and gifted and talented students, had higher percentages of students who reached above average or well above average growth from BOY to MOI on the M-Class assessment. So the last assessment we're going to look at is Circle, and we have done Circle in previous years. It's for our pre-K students. So I'm not going to read all of this to you, but we wanted to make you aware of what all Circle encompasses. There is phenomenological awareness, and at this point in time, it's not going to come out right. Early writing, overall math, and I want to read this one to you because we talk a lot about social emotional learning, and social emotional development as it's measured here is very different than the SEL that we talk about all the time. So it captures skills in positive social behaviors, classroom, community, and safety, emotion and behavior regulation, self-care, attention, and approaches to learning, and it's an observational measure. So sometimes when we think about SEL, that we're thinking something different. So I just wanted to make sure that I drew attention to that as you see the measures, so that it's rather clear. So the way that that Circle works is that we actually have developed the goal of 90% achievement in all of these subcategories that we want to achieve. So the way that circle is measured, it actually is the same standard at the beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year. So when we were talking about MAP and M-Class, that was a rising standard that they expected that you progressively learned more and were better, where this assessment actually assesses you where they want you to be at the end of pre-K. So for us at the 90% standard, you can see the gray circle is the beginning of year and the green circle is the middle of year. And we do anticipate that we're going to reach our goal of 90 for all of those years. In every year that we've done circle, we have reached those goals by the end of the year. So just want to make sure that we bring notice to that because it is a different measure of growth than what you have seen in the other two assessments. And then finally, across the 4 subtests, multilingual students had a higher percentage of students on track compared to pre-K students across the district. And just of note, we don't identify our students as gifted and talented in pre-K, and that's the only reason why it's dashed out. Okay, so the response and support, I'm going to hand it over to Ms. Westbrooks for the next part.
Thank you, Dr. Cobb. And so this next slide here, not sure who's controlling the slide here. Thank you. With this next slide here, this is a proverb, an African proverb that I know Dr. Hinojosa has shared a couple of times, and we are all extremely fond of it. So it never gets old that if you want to go fast, go alone, but if you want to go far, we go together. And so, of course, all of us, we certainly want to go far, and we plan to do it together. So everyone here is responsible for making sure that our students receive an excellent education. So Dr. Cobb has walked us through the what and where we are. And so now it's about what response do we need to have and what supports do we need to provide to our campuses. So Dr. Hinojosa gave us, as cabinet members, a call to action. And so that call to action gives all of us an opportunity to be in the work together with our school leadership office and alongside our campus principals to make sure that they understand that we're there for them, not only as a system of support, but also as advocates for them and for their needs. And so through creating a process to determine who our campuses are that were identified as our high needs campuses. So we use data from the 2021 STAR, and then some internal district data, which included attendance information, economically disadvantaged data, as well as internal progress monitoring data that's coming out of the PLCs and all the monitoring that goes on through the various departments. And we took that and tiered the campuses and created these high needs campuses. And there's 14 campuses that have been identified as high needs, 7 elementaries, 4 middle schools, and our 3 comprehensive high schools. And so as the cabinet team, we're responsible for, again, as mentioned, working alongside our school leadership team and our campuses and providing them with support, but not just support in theory, but making sure that our support is targeted and that we're targeting those areas that when we focus our attention on them, then we'll yield high results in student achievement. And so the question we walked away with was, what can we do right here, right now, that will have an impact and provide that support that's desperately needed by our campuses, but most importantly, walking away with a shared accountability and making sure that we're in it with them and that they see that we're just as accountable for the results as they are. So what we identified here were 6 areas that are our focus areas. And so the first one, and there's been lots of discussion throughout various presentations about the need to ensure that our teachers have a deep understanding of the content that they're teaching. And so providing support to ensure that that's happening and they're getting that support to understand that content throughout the year. And of course, we know the challenges that we're having with staffing and retaining our students. And so with the learning loss that's going on, that's just made worse by the continued vacancies and then the loss of employees throughout the school year. And also, of course, attendance. We just finished speaking about attendance and how low our attendance is. And we know we can't teach our students anything if they're not at school. So that's an area of focus. Identification and monitoring of our special populations. So first of all, making sure that we have our students coded correctly. And once we have them coded correctly, then we know what services they need, and then we can ensure that those services are provided to our students. And then also a focus on in-school and out-of-school suspensions. And how can we change it from just punitive, okay, you create a certain infraction and you're out of here. Instead of that, how can we have a more restorative focus? And we had a discussion just earlier today about the different levels of approval that's necessary in order to actually suspend a student. So let's look at what ways can we support the student as opposed to suspending the student. So that restorative focus on discipline. And then, of course, what other needs have we not thought about that our principals tell us that, you know, that's what the needs are. And so the goal here is for all of the cabinet team and all of the departments to lean in and provide that support in these core focus areas for our schools. Okay. And so what we've been doing over the last several weeks is cabinet is going out to our campuses, and we're meeting with school leadership, with Dr. Perez, with our assistant superintendents, with the campuses. We're out there at each campus every other week, and we're doing campus visits. So we start off with the meeting with the principals, and we do what's called a gut check. And we talk about what's going on at the campus, where are opportunities for growth, and also where are we doing very well, what's working for us. And so we go through the data with the principal, and then they choose 5 classrooms that we get to visit. And so once we walk the classrooms and we're in the work with the principals, we're seeing the interventions happening, we're seeing the instruction happen. And of course, those of us that didn't grow up, so to speak, in a classroom, we have a different set of eyes than, say, a Dr. Perez or our assistant superintendents. They see things differently. But what we're learning is we're walking through and I'm looking for anchor charts, and we're looking for the habits of discussion that are happening in the classroom, and all those things that now we're becoming a little dangerous, because now we know what to look for and what questions to ask. So and so once we complete the walks, we've talked through the data, we've talked through the glows and the grows, and then we sit down with the principal and we give our feedback. And this is what we saw. We get an opportunity to learn more about what we saw, and then finally find out what they need. And so you see here a copy of that support. And so we give them this sheet of paper, and we're all feverishly taking notes at the same time. And we say, okay, how can we support you in these areas? And so most are, where do you need the most support? And most principals are like, all of it. Tell me where. You know, what's available. And so just some examples of some of the immediate responses that we've had is, for example, one of our principals has a lot of vacancies, and just right now with everything that's going on, doesn't necessarily have time to do the hiring. So we said, okay, we'll put together a hiring committee and allow that hiring committee made up of former principals that are working in the district. They can screen your candidates for you and make sure that you get those excellent teachers on your campus. So that support we're able to put in place right away. We had another principal that said, I need Chromebooks. We're like, okay, how many Chromebooks do you need? So we come back, we talk to technology, and we get the Chromebooks on the campus for the students. Anything that's interrupting instruction, anything that's causing a pain point for our principals, that's where we come in, and we're the advocates and we're the support to make sure that they get what they need. And I knew it was working the first day that I got a call from Mr. Binkley across the way over there. And he said, hey, have a middle school, they need to post 3 positions for next year, and they're having a little difficulty. Can you help me with that? And I said, oh, the process is working. So we made sure that we removed those barriers, and we got those positions posted, thanks to Mr. Binkley's advocacy for the campuses. So that's what this looks like when we're out on the campuses in the work, again, as I mentioned, alongside our principals and alongside our school leadership team, making sure that we're all accountable and we're a part of the work and the effort that our campuses are putting forth every day. And so with that, if there are no questions, I'm going to hand it off to Dr. Perez.
Perfect, thank you. So I just wanted to just extend the piece with the visits have been very collaborative, right? And so we start off talking to the principals. It's not an I got you, we're here to really help you and support you. And I just wanted to share this. We were at Do It the other day, and we have champions now. So each of the campuses has an executive leader who is their champion, right? So not only do I have the opportunity to learn from what's happening at the campus level, but at the same time, there's a champion, and that's why she mentioned Mr. Binkley, et cetera, right? And so while we were at Do It, during the visit, Chief Ken Colbreth was with us, Dr. Carter, the principal. So we're walking around the hallway, going into this classroom, going to another classroom. So a teacher and a student, they approach Mr. Karampatan, and they kind of tell him like, why is the police officer escorting those two, that man and that woman over there, right? And so he's like, what do you mean? And then it clicked, right? It's like, oh, okay, well, that's right. That was Chief Colbreth, right? And so it's powerful, right, to have the teachers, the students see other executive leaders go into the work, because it is a difficult time right now to be a teacher, to be a student, to be a principal, right? And so we make the meeting very collaborative so that we can really gain support from the teacher, but really get some high leverage pieces that we can make a difference. And so I'm super excited to, I'm gonna call Principal Karampatan to come up here. And so part of this whole framework and blueprint, right, doesn't go anywhere if this doesn't help the teachers get better. Right, so that's the first piece that we focus on, making sure that we build teacher capacity, principal capacity, and staff capacity in general. And so I'm going to have Principal Karampatan share it with all of you part of the process as to how a leader works with not only teachers, but also with students with one of the areas, which is what we call a data-driven action planning. And it all goes back to the alignment of the SWOTs, as Ms. Westbrooks mentioned.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mr. Karampatan. I'm the principal at Do It Middle School. What Dr. Perez forgot to say was the kids told me is that I thought he was going to arrest somebody in the classroom. And that's what one of the kids was saying to us, the scholar said. So, but thank you. That was really an eye-opening experience for the kiddos and then the teachers, because they've never seen that type of visit from the different groups to see that what was in the work. And now they're seeing like, hey, they're actually really interested in us here. And so that was one of the big things that we had. So anyway, to have a conversation and to go about the data-driven action planning part, what we do is first we have to look at the data. And I want to give a shout out to Dr. Cobb for her team, because without the data, we'd be flying blind. You know, they're giving us an accurate data that is easy for us to use and easy for us to digest. So what we have to do is we analyze the data first, right? We analyze the data, what we have in there. When we do that, what really comes about is the teachers are able to look at the data they have as an individual. What is their contribution to the goal? And they have a self-reflection on their own end to see how can I help? And so that is one piece for the data-driven action plan that we do. Once we also celebrate the success of what they're able to do, because at the end of the day, it's like what everybody's mentioning, it is a hard, challenging year, and we have to be able to give the successes. Hey, I did well on this, my teacher did well in here. And a lot of times what ended up happening is the teachers lean on each other. Hey, you did well in this group. How did you do it? And then the other teacher will be able to tell, here's how I did it. And they're able to collaborate with each other without a non-threatening way for them to foster that care of a group work. So once we do that, then we get into the nitty-gritty of things, which is figuring out what are the things that we need to improve on. And those are the tweaks that we say, here are the biggest bang for a buck. We are not doing well on this. This is what we need to do to be able to be successful. And so why do we do that is so that way we can really, at the end of the day, refocus and really reteach and reteach our kiddos for the concepts and the content that they're struggling with. And we do that in 3 different ways. We're able to look at it from the do nows that we go back and respiral in. And we do it for the exit tickets that we have. So that way we have data to say if the reteach that we did well. And then we also utilize our after-school program tutoring for us to be able to do that for our kiddos that we have. Um, Do you have any question? And of course, before the acceleration piece, the acceleration classes that we have is also going to be utilized moving on forward to be able to use to be able to also boost our efforts to focus on the teaks that we need to focus on to be successful.
I'm curious about, so we've talked about student attendance and student absenteeism. And I know that teacher attendance and absenteeism is also a challenge on our campuses. And I wonder about how this works when the teacher in the classroom is what Dr. Hinojosa has told me we're calling interim teachers now. And how we're doing this data-driven action planning and engaging those teachers and giving them the support that they need. Because in a perfect situation, we staff a campus. The campus is 98% staff. So the team is there for the whole year. They get to know each other. They get to know the kids. They can talk about the data together. But when you have sort of some holes in your staffing that you're filling with these folks that are you know, we would have called them in my days a long-term sub. I just wonder about those challenges when it comes to interpreting data, beginning of year data, the end of year data, when they might not have been there when the school year started. I'm wondering about what that looks like on your campus.
So I'm glad you asked that question because that is where we have to hire, we don't just hire anybody. We look at those candidates that are qualified enough to be able to handle the situation that we're in. That's number one. And number two, we do a lot of training. We make sure that they understand what the expectations are and how to do it. We don't just let them go, hey, here's the data, figure it out. There's always going to be the teacher that they're with together, or it could be me, or it could be the associate principal or instructional specialist that is there to guide them through. And like Dr. Paraso's team, if they're struggling, I'll call him. I don't have a problem calling him. Hey, Doc, I need help over here. And they're always there to help out. So those are the mitigation steps that we take to ensure that they don't get left behind. Because you're right, if they don't feel they're too much pressure, they'll say, I'm done, sir. I'm not coming back. This is too much work. And we don't want that for them. So we give them all the support that we can give them.
But what I can say is, to your point, it is a challenge because if someone is having to take over the class where they didn't know the kids, they come in, they have to, right, we work on making sure that you build rapport before you start teaching to the scholars, get to know them, because in the end, all this will minimize not only disruptions, but at the end of the day, if they know you care, then the content will just flow in. And so getting a lot of the little things that make a big difference set up for them, I think it's ideal with getting for them to know the curriculum and putting all these Springway systems and routines in place to make it work. But it is a challenge. And that's part of where the schools and the principals and the specialists play different roles, right? And so then sometimes you have a sub for the interim that's there, right? A sub for the sub. And so, yeah, again, that throws another curveball. But then that's why we set up systems in place where you might have a lesson as a PowerPoint, and now that you provide the PowerPoint, and now the teacher is able to then go with the PowerPoint and teach the lesson more effectively. Do you guys have any other questions for Mr. Karampatan?
Yes, I'm curious. You said Chief Culbert walked the campus with you, and I'm hoping his walk was really not related to safety, but he came as the central office representative. What did he do for you? What were your needs? Who did he contact back here to make sure that it happened?
So the things that we talked about has happened in our campus almost immediately because I'm always in communication with Dr. Perez, and they must have a good communication process because whatever it is that we needed were given to us almost instantaneously, like a day or two. So what are those needs? We just asked for some more support in terms of, hey, can you give us some extra subs in here that we can get. For whatever reason it is, we didn't have any problem getting a sub for a couple of days. It changed a little bit after a while there because the sub said, I'm gonna do something else, but you know, they were a plus for us.
And one of the things we did was we looked directly at their attendance. And so we sent the police department out to deal with their attendance, some of their students that were beyond the 3-day range. And we sent them out to talk to moms and dads, I think the following day, if not the following day, a couple of days after. And I think we helped the campus close some of those loops up.
And we got our 5.5%, so we got $2,000 extra because of the process that were able to help us. Chief Officer Arnold was in there making sure how we can help us. So we got some support.
I'm wondering, after the data-driven action planning, so now we have a plan, what's next? How do we ensure that that we continue with progress monitor? What does that look like?
So that is a continuing process that we have because obviously the data will keep on moving. So all we are able to do is make sure that our teachers are going to commit to this also in the long term. So we have teachers that are willing to stay after school. And we have a process now to plan for Saturday schools and to be able to really zone in on the TEKS that we say, these are what we're weak on, what are we willing to teach them, and what are we going to do, and how we're going to teach these TEKS to the targeted scholars that we have.
So after school, what about the instructional day?
The instructional day, we spiral in our lower TEKS that we have on our classes. So with the teachers, just make sure that the scholars basically say you're weak and this is what we need help on right now. So that is what we are working on during that specific day to help out on the TEKS. So that way they can still continue on with the lesson of the new curriculum that we have to be able to still be at pace.
So I'm wondering, how do we track that?
So we use what we have is the trackers that we have. We actually have a data tracker for exit ticket trackers that we have
Right.
that the teachers use to again engage to be able to come back into.
And then my next question is, so what do we do, or what is our response if we realize that there may be a breakdown or that's not happening, or we come back around and the data is the same?
That is when the teachers really do a big pause and say, do we really need to stop, this lesson right now so that we can reteach this concept that we have? And I don't want to, our other part member is going to talk about what that looks like and how much threshold it is that we do that. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I'm going to bring up Miss Laura Hunter. She's the interim principal for Westwood, and she's going to address some of those pieces because we have that broken up with some different pieces. That way they don't steal the other people's thunder.
Okay.
And then as Miss Laura Hunter comes to the front, the idea, right, was not for us to, oh, there you are. I'm sorry, Miss Hunter was here. So there
We're
you
gonna
are.
have,
So yeah, would you?
Dr. Bettis, we'll have
do wanna
since
point
the
out-
principals know, let's do them really quickly because we also have students here and they're also getting
Right.
tired. So we'll let the principals kind of flow. You don't have to introduce them. I think they're all ready to come up one by one.
Yeah, I just had a kind of a general overall question. I love the idea of administration getting down in the trenches and visiting the schools and letting the staff know that they're being supported. But this is more of a kind of overall, have you seen any hesitation, or even some fear? Because, not having this kind of interaction, now all of a sudden you start seeing people coming from central office showing up at your campuses, are you seeing some of that and how are you addressing that?
So I can let the principals talk about that.
So good evening, I'm Laura Hunter. I'm the interim principal at Westfield High School. And so what I want to focus on as far as targeting our students' instructional needs are three reports that we use from MAP that are very beneficial for the teachers. So first off, I want to talk about the student profile, because the student profile gives an overall view of the student's growth in reading and math, and then it tells what areas of needs. But what's also good about that report is it gives a projection for the STAR, and then it also gives a projection for how the student will perform on the ACT and SAT. So what the teacher can do is they can use this report in student and parent conferences, and then in connection with the student goal sheet, we can look at what are the goals that the student wants to achieve. And so all of that can be done using that one document. Also, two that are really key to when we look at how we're going to do our small groups and our intensive support would be the learning continuum report, and then also the class breakdown. So when you look at the learning continuum report, what that does is it groups the students with the concept that they still need assistance with. So as far as what a teacher may need to reteach, if you have a whole group on one TEK that they didn't master or they didn't grow, then we may need to have whole class reteach on that concept. But also in connection with the class breakdown report, you can look at what your small groups are going to be. With the class breakdown report, it tells you who is performing below grade level, but it also tells you who's performing above, at or above grade level. So not only are we looking at our groups for intervention, pullouts, maybe some intensive one-on-one support, but we can also look at grouping students. So there's some peer tutorials. So if I have a student performing at a TEK at or above grade level, I can pair them with a couple of students that may need some support when we're in class working in groups, when the teacher may be working with an individual group. This is very helpful during the day when we have our accelerated learning periods, because that's when we want to see most of those groups and that in-class support and those pullouts going. As far as the support with the high needs campus and the visit, we're just lucky that our teachers welcome the support, welcome the feedback. So yeah, it may have been a little at first, what's going on, but then when you tell them the purpose, that they're a second set of eyes for us, and they're coming in to tell us not just what we need to work on, but they're also telling us what we're doing well so that we can continue. And then when the teachers hear that, yeah, it's more welcoming. We need that support because we want the school to get better and we want our students to be successful.
All right, and I'll add to that. Good afternoon. The teachers, I mean, they are just excited. You know, at first I think it was a little intimidating, but then when you have an assistant sup or you have a cabinet member who's high-fiving them or telling them good job, that lets down that guard for our teachers. And so they are really receptive. And I think we're setting up as a district a culture of coaching and feedback. It's not a I got you. And I want to add on to what Ms. Westbrook said. I mean, immediately, I was the principal that said, I need Chromebooks. I need some smart boards. You know, I need these to be looked at. And immediately she went to another campus, took pictures. They had extra smart boards. She was sending me pictures of, hey, we found you some smart boards. Dr. Perez emailed me, text, and also Ms. Westbrook to say, hey, did you get those Chromebooks? And then just to even get a thoughtful message from your assistant super or your cabinet means a lot. And so I'll go into the next part because I know Dr. Hinojosa wants us to allow our students to come up. But as we continue to see that growth on our campus and in our district, we contribute that to our spring waste systems and our routines. And so it's allowed high delivery of high quality instruction, and it is ensuring that we have just that student engagement and that success for our students. And so not only have these systems allow for that collaboration or that calibration with our students and with our teachers, it's also made sure that we're successful. Our students are successful at whatever campus that they may attend. So if I'm at Major and I have a student that moves over to Meyer, they get a lot of those same systems. And so that's been wonderful to see. And so I want to share a little bit about what drives that work. And so it is our PLCs. It is our analyzing of student work. You know, our teachers come to our PLCs now and they have their teacher exemplars. And so what better way to come prepared? Because the teachers have done that work. And so from there, they're identifying those trends. They're looking at the strengths. They're identifying those misconceptions and those gaps for the reteach. And so we are having opportunities to divide our students' work up, whether it's non-mastered or mastered or lowest, highest, and in between. And then we also look at PBIS, CHAMPS, restorative practices, and TLAC. We love Teach Like a Champion. And so when we look at this, we are trying to keep our scholars in school. We don't want them to be out of school. And so we do things like PBIS, and the students enjoy getting those points or getting those all-star books so that they can shop at the store or receive incentives such as eating lunch with the administrator or playing a board game quickly with the administrator so we don't lose instruction. But also our cabinet has been wonderful in coming out to be able to see the work as well, you know, taking pictures, giving feedback. And also our assistant soups has been present in that work as well. And so they're out consistently with the purposeful walks and agendas that they have for us. And then finally, we have their professional development piece of Amplify, Carnegie, Eureka. And it has been very helpful to have them come out to the campus because we know it's a new curriculum and our teachers have struggled with some of it, but they've been able to comfortably have their productive struggle in those PLCs. They've been able to utilize the resources or the manipulatives in the PLCs as well. And so this PD has been provided. It is producing great results so that teachers have more highly effective delivery of that instruction. And that PD has been offered to all spring ISD teachers, whether it's during PLC learning time, Saturdays, or after school tutorials. So I want to say from the principals, thank you all for that.
So now we have Jonathan. Would you please introduce yourself? Talk about what school, what grade.
Good evening, Hosa School Board. My name is Jonathan Manzon, and I'm an 8th grade algebra student from Spring Leadership Academy. I'm here to speak with you about the Matthew curriculum. My classmates and I are in algebra, and for class we're required to do a minimum of 60 minutes per week every week. I typically work on Matthew at school and sometimes after school. During math interventions class, we have an hour to do Matthew. However, if I do not have time at school, I work on it at home. In my opinion, it is important to do Matthew to learn the basics of algebra. I believe Matthew is also beneficial because many of us fell behind in the beginning of the year due to the pandemic. In Matthew, we were reinforcing what we weren't able to go in depth with at the beginning of the year. Another benefit of Matthew is we are able to relearn things from different times of school year. Some things in Matthew are new, so we haven't learned them in school yet. So I appreciate the exposure. Also, I like that Matthew is differentiated. Some kids may be ahead and some behind, so they get to practice at their own learning level. In my opinion, Matthew is a great way to review and practice different concepts that help us become stronger in math. I would strongly recommend it to students at any grade level. Thank you.
Just had a quick question. Is Matthew a supplement to your algebra course, or is it a virtual course?
It's part of Carnegie. Is the same part of Carnegie, just that Matthew is integrated into Carnegie. It's a math course that it's for normal math or algebra, and we have different courses inside of it that we get to practice every single day and every week so that we can get better and like learn the base of the math.
Just to expound on that, I'm Sharice Waterman. I'm an instructional coach at SLA. But yes, Matthew, it's part of the Carnegie Learning, but it's also it's a supplement to Algebra 1, the Algebra 1 course. It's not part of, we don't use Carnegie in Algebra 1. We use the traditional Algebra 1, but it's also a supplement to kind of help reinforce the student skills as well.
And so most of your friends are using it?
Yes.
And they like it?
Yes.
Okay. Any challenges with it?
Yes, because it gets more into depth on every single learning, so it gets difficult. but when you get to learn it and review it every single time and every lesson, it gets easier and easier, and you can.
So it
understand.
challenges you.
Yes.
Yeah. Are you here by yourself or you have a parent here?
Yes, I have my mom over there.
Does mom want to stand up and be recognized?
So do I understand this? So you got your MAP scores a week ago, a few weeks ago? You got the little report that Dr. Perez was talking about?
Yes.
And so that report has your achievement level. I'm not gonna make you tell me what yours was. It has your achievement level and it has your growth level, and then it has like the areas that you need to work on. And so we can use this Mathlia application to focus on those. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
Good evening, Dr. Hinojosa and esteemed board members. My name is Sharice Waterman again, and it is my honor to stand here sit before you and speak on behalf of Spring Leadership Academy, where I serve as the math instructional coach under the dynamic leadership of Dr. Kevin Banks. As a consequence of the pandemic over these past 2 years, many educators feel that education has taken a downward turn. Some would say the negative impact is ongoing. However, I believe it has some positive effects. As a result of the pandemic, we have learned that our scholars and teachers are resilient. They have the ability to overcome any challenge or obstacle that stands before them. We also have learned that technology can and should be an integral part of the education arena. The development of the curriculum that incorporates technology is what education needs. As our scholars compete in the global scene, they must have the ability to navigate their education journey in real time as well as self-paced. Carnegie Learning has provided that experience for us. Our middle school scholars are learning through discovery as well as self-paced instruction. As a consequence of COVID, many of our scholars are behind in their learning. Through Carnegie Learning and Mathia, they have the opportunity to gain the much needed remediation as well as an introduction to new material to assist in closing the achievement gap. As you know, Mathia is an online learning component of Carnegie Learning that is designed to meet our scholars where they are. It provides self-paced, real-time instruction to aid in the learning process. In order to ensure our students are able to move forward with the curriculum and close the gaps that are present, we require each scholar to complete a minimum of 60 minutes of Mathia each week. This time frame can be completed at one time or over a course of an entire week. I believe that the constant exposure, whether it's 10 to 15 minutes a day or an hour over the weekend, provides our students with the necessary practice they need to be successful. You may ask, has this been an easy task? Absolutely not. However, our scholars are moving in the right direction. You may wonder, do all our scholars enjoy it? To be absolutely honest, I would say no, but the majority are willing to do the work. The inclusion of Mathia, along with the dedication of our education facilitators, which is our teachers, has helped our scholars move in an upward trajectory despite the challenges and obstacles that have been set before them in their past. Once again, I appreciate this opportunity to come before you and speak on behalf of Spring Leadership Academy and the Mathia program. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that with us and being transparent.
Quick question before you leave.
Yes, ma'am.
So as the instructional coach,
Yes, ma'am.
I know we have Carnegie and Mathia. If you could wave your magic wand, what would you add, or what resources would you like to see to support our kids and teachers?
I really like Carnegie. It does need some tweaking, to be honest.
Okay.
They need to make some adjustments, and this is the first year rollout, so we meet with the reps and they have heard some of the things that we've said.
Okay.
With Mathia, I think the combining of the two, because of the curriculum, is a little bit more difficult because they don't consider other like assessments and things that we have to do district-wide that are required, like benchmarks and campus-based assessments and things like that. So my thing is, it needs to be a little, I think, more inclusion from coaches to help develop the calendar for it. But other than that, I think math is great. And also, let me back up. Training. We need a full-on out training over the summer to really involve the teachers and getting them the training, what they need in order for it to really implement it as it should be. I think that's the main thing, is the training, and then making sure the coaches and the teachers are included in a conversation of the curriculum and the pacing of it.
Thank you.
So this is a new program. I always wonder about how quickly the teachers accept and sort of adopt new programs. And so are we seeing that? I think I want to know about sort of across the district. So maybe this is a question for you, Mr. Perez. Whether it's Mathia, am I saying it right? Whether like teachers are really seeing it as a resource that can help with their instruction.
You can go. And I'd love to speak to that too. So the training piece, definitely, and we have actually secured already for our summer institutes and our new teacher institutes, and then have level 1 and 2. And the feedback from the teachers has been very positive. I think the challenge from the feedback that we've had is implementing the new curriculum and adjusting your pacing to keep up and still having that time in your instructional day. And I think you did a great job of speaking to, it can be done daily in 15 minutes or a day, or a weekend or a homework assignment. So there's been a lot of positive feedback. Teachers have said they've really enjoyed the live view. So unlike a lot of programs that students might get on and they're just kind of on their own doing it, there's a live teacher note dashboard, and it notifies them like, oh, this student needs help, and it explains why. And so even doing small group instruction, they're able to see that while the students are working, and it's integrated into the curriculum for 6th through 8th.
Can you briefly just reiterate what you were indicating when you said a calendar?
Well, of course, we have certain TEKS that we have to meet. We have the planning for our yearly calendar as regards to preparing for STAR, making sure our kids are all set and, to be successful. So when Carnegie created with TEA, the pacing and the calendar as to what we should teach and how how long we should spend on a particular topic and how it should be taught, and then the order. However, sometimes TEA, they're not, if you're not on campus and things that are going on with the STAR, they developed the STAR, but allowing us to kind of have an input as to say, okay, we need to maybe rearrange the modules, and we need to rearrange the order and how things should be taught to make sure that we're hitting those TEKS that are the high yield TEKS, making sure our students are prepared for it.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, everyone. My name is Destiny Brunson, and I teach 5th grade math at Meyer Elementary. And I just want to start off saying I'm so grateful and excited to be here today to share the growth of my scholars in the classroom so far. So I want to give you a little bit of background information in regards to data. So 69% of my scholars showed growth according to the MAP test. When comparing the checkpoint taken in October to the benchmark taken previously a couple weeks ago in February, and approaches, I went from 20% to 79%. In meets, I went from 9% to 54%. And in masters, I went from 6% to 23%. Thank you. So I am very proud of my students and their growth and their hard work this year so far. And I want to highlight some strategies that I use in my classroom that I think contribute to the growth of my scholars. So the first strategy is habits of discussion. And I use this to allow my students to collaborate to find the solutions to a problem. They're able to listen to one another. They're able to give valuable feedback to each other. And then if some students are struggling, they're able to have that peer tutoring with that one-on-one. And then this allows me to have have the opportunity to see if they need a little bit more help. Are they able to explain the process? Do they have a deep understanding of what was just taught to them? I also provide individual anchor charts with notes before we start the lesson to give the students some background knowledge and background information, and they're able to use this as a resource during the lesson and during independent time. If they ever get stuck, they're able to open their journals back up and then refer back to that. And then, of course, aggressively monitoring to ensure I'm giving students high quality and immediate feedback to ensure they're working independently, they're understanding the lesson, and that they are on task. And the last strategy I want to highlight is the small group. For me, that's the most beneficial. I'm able to look at all of the data from the tests, quizzes, do nows, exit tickets. I'm able to pull what students need more help on that specific TEK or objective. So I pull them to my small group. I start with the skill first to make sure they understand how to solve it. So for example, 5.3G is dividing decimals. We go over the steps of how to divide decimals first. Then once they master the skill, we go into, okay, well, how is it going to be on a word problem? What questions are they asking you? Then we deep dive into, okay, well, why is F wrong? Why is G wrong? Why do you think they put that on there? And so on and so forth. And once they have mastered that, then they're free to go on. And then I quiz them on Education Galaxy to ensure that they are mastered that TEK and that objective. And so thank you so much for this opportunity to share. I'm so excited to continue to watch them grow and succeed. And I want to introduce my student, Kelsey, and she's going to share her experience in my classroom.
Greetings. My name is Kelsey Stoudemire, and I am a 5th grade student at Meyer Elementary. Ms. Brunson is my math teacher, and I am getting a great learning experience in her classroom. Every morning, Ms. Brunson greets us and makes sure that we feel welcome. She has a system in which we collaborate with groups to come up with solutions to math problems. Ms. Brunson provides our class with notes and anchor charts to make sure we understand the objective for the day. She walks around and makes sure that each student is on task and focused. Ms. Brunson gives us choices for working on ST Math or Education Galaxy. I can honestly say that being in Ms. Brunson class has made me the successful student I am today. Thank you, Ms. Brunson.
Do you have a parent or anyone with you we can recognize? All right, there's mom. Hi, mom. And is Dawkins, the principal, here for Myers? Yeah, there she is. Thank you.
I just want to shout out because all my kids are Meyer kids.
Shout out to Myers. Huh? That's great.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, I will ask the same question. So if you could wave your magic wand, what would you like to add, or what resources, supports do you feel you need to continue seeing success and growth with your students in math?
The resources that I would add is more, for me, more social emotional resources.
Okay.
Because a lot of our scholars from 5th grade, they were online. A majority of them were online last year. So we are having some challenges with how to act in the classroom, how to have those social relationships with each other, but we do have Quaver. We're using that. I know we have restorative circles. We have circles in the classroom where we have discussions, but just a little bit more with that, I would say.
How are the students taken to Quaver?
They like it. They like it. The songs, not so much because they're a little bit older, you know, but as far as like the topics, discussions, they like discussing and talking about the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. We know it's late and you've had a long day, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And we did recognize our principal at Myers, but is Dr. Banks here from Spring Leadership Academy from our first student? Fantastic. Great.
And we have one.
More students?
Hello, my name is Rachel Finley and I'm an instructional coach at Westfield High School. One of the professional development that we have been offered, well, I had the opportunity, some other instructional coaches and I had the opportunity to go to one of the Saturday professional developments on aggressive monitoring. And when we left there, we were provided with a plethora of resources for when you go into the classroom, to specific observations that you can look for and action steps that you can provide that teacher with. So upon returning to campus, all of us immediately were able to implement that. I was able to talk with Ms. Hunter and ask her, okay, of the one, with aggressive monitoring, there's several different aspects of it. And I was asking her which one you prefer for us to focus on first. She picked aggressive monitoring. So we were able to go in the classroom and teach. I had one-on-one sessions with some of the English teachers, and we had a first-year English teacher whom, after the aggressive monitoring one-on-one session her and I had and the action steps I gave her, she started implementing them in her classroom. And on our fall final, we saw a 23% increase on her MEETS data. So I would like us to continue with the professional developments offered through your department. Also, with our English 1 team, we were able to implement exemplars and our intellectual prep, and we have seen a night and day difference with the conversations happening within PLC. So it's been really exciting to see that as well.
Hi, I'm Crystal Mayer. I'm the associate principal at Westfield High School. And we've been working very closely with Dr. Pariseau and his team and Tracy Walker specifically. And she's been helping us as a thought partner in discussing some of the different data points that we have, developing very targeted plans. We knew that English 2 was an area of growth for us. And so kind of working with Dr. Pariseau and Tracy Walker, we've been able to develop very specific action plans to continue improving our teachers and giving them, good quality coaching in the classroom, as well as, thinking through some of these different pieces to help support them in the learning, because all of our teachers in English 2, they all want their students to succeed. So really targeting and being specific with what supports do they individually need, and then also as a team collectively, what we can do to continue pushing forward to ensure that our students are meeting and mastering their content.
And then finally, the last piece of the puzzle, right? It's the parents, the ability to, with the goal in mind, to empower the parents so that they understand not only how to use the reports, but walk them through and see how they can help their child achieve their academic success, right? Whatever that might be, either in middle school, high school, or beyond that. And so what I did want to show you is that we have a digital parent guide for the student assessments. If I can have Mr. King or Jason, if you can click on the hyperlink for me. Is it here? There we go. And so what it is, it's in English and in Spanish. And because it's digital, then parents are able to actually click through, and there's tabs where each of the assessments are actually outlined with the purpose, and they're able to click and it becomes a digital book, right? And so they get an explanation. You have tabs on the left side, and all these tabs are broken up by different grade levels. So if you have a student in pre-K, you can read about circle assessment of the data that we just shared, and it's in English and in Spanish, and it goes all the way through K through second grade for the Amplify assessment in class, and then you move on to the next grade levels for MAP all the way to high school, and it has also some information about STAR. And so we've got this as an additional resource for the parents, for them to go back and reference. Ms. Trinita Carroll, as part of her parent engagement committee meetings, she's worked with parents where they're actually training them, helping them, and sharing these resources and other resources so that they can have the tools in their hands to be able to work with their kids at home and be able to really, with the goal to understand the purpose of the assessments and how they can best serve their students.
I have a question. How do parents access this? Is it sent to them or?
Yes, so this is actually on the website, but we also, so at MOY right now, right? So we just finished the middle of the year. Thank you. We just finished the middle of the year assessment, and we send out a communication to all parents. So they have the hyperlink there. We send the communication in English and Spanish so that people can have access to that. And then also what some principals do as well is they work with, we have S'mores, and S'mores is an actual communication. It's a digital flyer where they can put it and link it in, so that way they have the video but also these pieces, so they'll embed it within that as well.
And it's also on all of their portals. So on all parent portals as well as staff portals, they will see the icons for the English and the Spanish.
Yeah, I got mine yesterday, so good job.
Oh, did you? Okay, well, good.
Are we able to track utilization? We have analytics from the tool itself.
We do, yes, and we can provide those to you.
Okay. I'd be curious to see if there's a spike after something's been advertised, promoted, or communicated, so that we know which communication channel is working the most and is most effective. So looking at some of the analytics can be really helpful.
Absolutely, thank you. Let me write that.
Yeah. In addition, I think to how Dr. Perez said it, is it's the different puzzle pieces and having it all come together. And really the focus that we've had on listening to where the needs are. And so in addition to everything that's been shared, we're also developing intervention resources for teachers so that they're able to take those items directly by standard and have resources they can immediately utilize in the class. And those are at all three levels: elementary, middle, and high. You had heard from some of our principals and our coaches about the work of PLCs and the support. So all the departments across central office have been heavily in PLCs, supporting the implementation of the curriculum as well as the Springway systems. We've also been working to hire and train tutors and provide resources. We've been working with our high school students and recruiting them to tutor on our campuses, as well as students that are in education programs at the university, and hiring those to come out and provide tutoring as much as they can. Even if it's 1 day a week for a couple hours, we will take you. And so that has been very successful, and those are moving into campuses now. And then we also have been working as a cross-functional team, really focusing on that differentiated support. So that was one of the reasons for the change in curriculum, because it did encompass all of the different areas and provided supports. And our teams from curriculum, special ed, multilingual, and GT have been working together to support our teachers in that work.
I have a real quick question before we move on. Ms. Hunter, you mentioned the class breakdown report that shows below, at, and above level. I was just wondering what assessment that comes from.
That was the math assessment.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we were very excited to roll out the MAP assessment this year, and so focusing on English, and we'll also be working to add Algebra 1 to that. So in addition to that, you always come to us and say, how can we help? And we have the best board in the world because that is truly your heart, is to help. And so we just ask that you continue what you've been doing, and that is through the community and state outreach that you do. We love to see you, but we know all of you actually volunteer on our campuses. We say thank you for that. Please keep coming, mentoring our students, building those community partnerships, which have been so integral in making a difference here in Spring, and the advocacy you do at the state and national level for education. And we know that you also have a large group of constituents that you reach out to all the time through social media, and that you have a great influence over. And we just say, please continue to reach out to them, let them know of the great things that are happening, and that we would love their support in our campuses as we work to close these gaps for our kids.
Thank you. We will continue to do that.
Can I throw something out there before we move on? I didn't get to ask the middle school group up here, and goes back to my question. It really, those numbers really stick in my head, that drop from elementary to middle school. And I know there's no magic bullet. I know we can't build a 6th grade campus in the way that we do for high school. We have a 9th grade campus, but I just kind of want to throw that out there. Maybe that's the way we need to kind of look at it, is some sort of a transition for these kids going from 5th to 6th grade in the same way that we do for the 9th grade to the high school.
Absolutely. And that is something we had started a few years ago, really working on that transition program. Something that we're working on revamping and saying, how do we have those additional supports so that kids are getting those experiences as they move from 5th grade to 6th grade. They're being on the campus, they're seeing the programs, then, a bridge program to be able to help provide the support. And the avenue that we're working to address is through the support of the student as well as the parent partnership, and being able to help make sure that's a smooth transition. Because it is scary when you go from a student population that's almost double at some of our middle schools. And then the same for high school. So that has continued in the work. And I know that family and community engagement also has been a great partner in that as we work to make those smooth transitions for our kids.
And did we not have some components in Lift 6 that address that, and how are they working in?
So
where
that's
we was
actually
at?
when Dr. Parasol said, a couple of years ago, we started that work. And if you'll remember, we actually started that work in 2019, 2020, and we know what happened then. But the year before, and as a part of our bond program, we did a lot of outreach specifically to the parents of 5th grade students, because we saw the decrease of student enrollment from elementary to middle school. From 5th to 6th, we were looking and saw kids leaving our district. We also saw the exact thing that you have noticed, is the drop in student performance. And so we met with the parents and talked about what is it that we needed. And we were able to respond specifically. They wanted smaller campuses, because going to a big middle school right now, we're looking at our middle schools almost hitting 1,000 students, right? So that was one of the requests, and that was the birth of SLA. Spring Leadership Academy. Our parents said they want smaller class size, and smaller schools. They also said they were interested in specialty schools. So we opened the IB program out at Springwoods Village, right? And so that campus is also pretty small. It's right at 500 or so with a specialty program. And then we put specialty programs inside the comprehensive schools. So you see the Rick Bailey School for Performing and Visual Arts. You'll see Clowton Polytechnic. And then very specific, the Lift 6 components that we are implementing at all of our middle schools. And so we got off the ground really good and strong, and then, 2 years of COVID. But we have resurrected that, and you'll hear some talks about RSSP, which is a grant that we received from the state to help us fund the training for our middle schools. The other piece that we did also as a result of what the parents asked us, they were looking for a K-8 campus to where the students don't have to leave middle school, but they can stay there. And so our response was the BAML, the School for International Studies at BAML Pre-K 8. And then the last piece, and you may have noticed it, I know our board members that have been here for a minute, you saw that our assistant superintendents in the past, they had either only elementary or only middle school or only high school. And so we reassigned them, and they are assistant superintendents for for elementary and middle. So for example, Feeder 1 has 5 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. And so that assistant superintendent is responsible for ushering these elementary schools that feed right into these middle schools and helping that transition. And then the last piece is what Dr. Parasol was talking about, and specifically with our education planning guide, is how do we do that summer transition? Right, we do fish camps, and I saw our high school principals are not here, but we do fish camps for the 9th graders to get, into the high schools. But are we doing that 6th grade camps? So our 5th graders can go to experience what 6th grade would look like. So different components that we're bringing back now that we are all face-to-face and back on campus. But it is something that absolutely, yes, it's happening nationwide, but what is our response? What are we going to do about it?
So that was just a lot that we put in place to address issues at the, or opportunities at our middle school campuses. But with the pandemic and everything, we really haven't, seen that bear fruit yet.
Now, also add, we talked about the students transitions and the parents, and then the assistant superintendents, how they have the vertical alignment. What about the teachers? Might there be opportunities for 5th grade teachers to go to 6th grade campuses so they can have more vertical alignment and have more understanding of what their students need for the next level?
Absolutely. And I know through our professional development with Dr. Harris and Ms. Walker, how do we make that connection, right? So that we are building on the 5th grade, and the 6th grade teachers know what the 5th grade students have learned, but the 5th grade teachers understand the expectations. So that teaming and that training is really important to keep that alignment. And I know the assistant superintendents do that work in bringing teachers together, bringing principals together so that they understand the connection. But you're absolutely right.
There used to be quite a bit of talk about teachers following their students in a cohort fashion. And again, Carmen's always reminding us that we put a lot on teachers and never take anything off their plate. But I wonder about whether we would be able to get teachers to make that transition from 5th grade to 6th grade, and then sort of just rotate back, like get them through that tough year, then come back and get another group and just have, again, it's maybe a lot to ask, and maybe there would need to be some sort of supplemental extra pay for making that request of teachers, but
I know looping is very, it's common in elementary. You loop. I know as a teacher, I looped from 2nd grade to 3rd grade, and it cuts down so much of learning and students and the teachers and everything. From 5th to 6th grade, that's a lot.
Pretty big stipend.
Elementary teachers are elementary teachers. Well, you were a middle school teacher, and if we told you you were going to elementary next year, what would you do? You're like,
so I guess you would be asking teachers to sort of volunteer. I mean, I'm just thinking out of the box, because it's a problem, and it's not just a problem in spring, it's with that age group. Like you said, I taught middle school. I know like the KIPP schools, when I was with KIPP, like part of why they started with 5th graders was because they were trying to develop that culture that could carry those kids through. And it seems like it's really hard to do when you're taking fifth graders out of an elementary school where they may have had two teachers, some of them still only have one, and now they're transitioning by themselves. I got one going through it right now, from class to class. And so just, some other thinking about it.
Absolutely. I think definitely sitting through and looking at, what are different strategies that we can bring to the table to address what our students need. Our students are different, and you can see, I just have to say, I appreciate the involvement from each of you with our data. This is, the request, and Ms. Durant, when we meet, she'll ask, can we look at the data this way? Can we look at it, differently? And I know each one of you are sharing your requests with Ms. Durant, but it helps us get sharper and helps us look at a different way at this data and what is the data telling us. And I know, 2 hours of this discussion may seem like a lot, but I think it was very intentional. And then for us and our principals and teachers and coaches and students that were here, we are doing a lot. Then we have to step back. I think the question that Ms. Durant said, is it working, right? So you can see we have a lot of spinning plates up there that we need to be able to determine what is working, what isn't working, and what can we take off so that we can go deeper in specific strategies or activities. And that's part of the work that Dr. Paris saw, and the curriculum team and the workforce development team are really honing in. And it's through these discussions that we're able to think through and go back to the drawing board, bring our teachers in, bring our principals in and say, what about this? How would it work? What does it look like? It may not be something that is responsive for our students, but it may be something that would be worth piloting at a specific, feeder pattern where teachers would be open to this type of innovative programming.
Absolutely. And I think if we're going to get our kids back on track, it's going to take some out of the box thinking and processes. And I feel that you have the support of a board that's willing to do that out of the box work. I do know that Trustee Newhouse and Jensen and I had an opportunity to have a little one-on dive into the data with Dr. Cobb, and that may be a good opportunity for some of our newer board members. I don't want to put more on her plate, but I think that would be a good opportunity for our newer board members to have some FaceTime with her to take a deeper dive into that data.
And I don't know if Dr. Cobb mentioned it, but in your packet, you do have a lot of the raw data in here that, you're definitely over spring break. You may want to look at it and then schedule some time with Dr. Cobb and or, her analysts that can walk through and dig a little bit deeper. It is, I know that she's open, her team is open to having those discussions.
She does an amazing job at breaking it down like Ms. Westbrooks does with the finances for us, so.
And you saw the amazing teachers and coaches we have. I mean, that's just a sampling of our teachers. And like they said, it's been difficult, but they've stuck with it. They're going through and they're giving it their best shot. Just really proud of our staff, our team.
I have to say, I was really impressed with the teacher from my kid's alma mater. The way she discussed the data and how she used it to plan moving forward. That's really good to hear from teachers. So great job.
All right, so thank you, Dr. Cobb and Dr. Perez and all of our participants this evening. For our next item, I'd like to again recognize our Chief of Schools, Dr. Michael Perez.
Thank you, Madam President. The recommended action, and I'm going to go into the summary for this next item for the board to consider approving the 2022-2023 ADSY, which is known as the Additional Day School Year Calendar. Option A, as recommended by administration. And I wanted to give you a brief summary, and I also want to introduce Principal Gomez and Principal Fisher from both Clark Primary and Clark Intermediate. So the Spring Independent School District was awarded the ADSY grant, which provides funding to add 20 instructional days for students in the project. Some of the specific requirements include district-wide instructional calendar must include 180 days, which ours does. The idea was that the district must have a minimum of 20 additional added days to participate in this program, with a total of including up to 200 days as part of this program. So I'm going to now turn it over to Principal Gomez, and she's going to share some of the benefits behind having this calendar option A as part of their instructional calendar for the following school year.
Good evening, Board of Trustees. Good evening, Dr. Hinojosa and Cabinet. I'm Cynthia Gomez. I'm the principal at Clark Primary. And at Clark Primary, we've been doing the work of getting prepared for next year. So one of the things that's been happening on our campus is having talks with our teachers about the calendar for our upcoming school year, and having them have a voice in choosing which calendar they would prefer. So they had a choice of two calendars, option A and option B. And really very briefly, option A had the teachers coming back a week earlier than everyone else, and the students starting school a week earlier than the rest of the district. Option B had the students coming back on the same day that all the other students in Spring ISD would be coming back, and the teacher started a week before. So the teachers voted, and overwhelmingly, the teachers preferred option A. That option had us beginning in August and ending in June. Option B had us beginning in August and later in August and going through July. Then we had meetings for our parents in both English and Spanish, and we talked to them about the calendars. We met with them, and then they had the opportunity to also give us their feedback. And overwhelmingly, the parents also chose option A, which was the same choice that our teachers had. So want to give you just a little bit of information. So we began school back in July. It's been a long time since we opened our doors, July 19th to be exact. And on July 19th, we had 236 students who showed up at our door. Very happy to welcome them. And going back to what Board Member Durant said, is it effective what we're doing? So that is definitely something that we're always looking at, our data. So we did pull data after our middle of the year testing. And we compared our students that were with us since July 19th to all of our other students that were not with us on July 19th when we opened our doors. And in the area of reading, our students that were with us from day one, July 19th, showed a 12% increase in their reading achievement. In math, the children that were with us since July showed a 13% increase in their achievement in math. So for right now, I'm very eager to see what our end of the year testing results will show. But right now we can see that it did impact. It did have an impact. So what exactly did we do when students showed up on July 19th? We were ready for them. And we know that everything starts with the building of relationships. You know, everything starts with that. And our teachers had a lot of time to build relationships with the children, with the parents, with the community. And we also had an opportunity to spend a lot of time creating systems that with procedures that would turn into routines. We spent a lot of time also for a lot of our first graders. It was their first time at school. They hadn't been at school for pre-K. They hadn't been in school for kindergarten. So that was something that was new. And having that extra time to get to know them, to build relationships, to do a lot of social emotional lessons. We love Quaver. Our kids love Quaver. Teachers make connections in their classes. I walked into a classroom the other day And there was an issue that was happening and the teacher addressed it beautifully. She went and said, you know, first thing this morning, we did a lesson and what did we learn in our lesson? And it was quickly resolved. So we just love it. And we were able to do a lot those extra days that we had at the beginning.
All right. Good evening. I'm Catherine Fisher, the proud principal of Clark Intermediate. And as we talked about thinking outside of the box, ADSY or the additional days gives us that opportunity to think outside the box. Number one, we get a chance to have additional planning for our teachers where they're able to engage in professional development, engage in extra planning around the curriculum, and also talk about some of those social and emotional needs of our students. Like Ms. Gomez, we had 427 students show up at our doorsteps, which is about 71% of our students. By the end of the ADSY term, they were with us. Thinking about student achievement, we had 11% increase of our ADSY students versus our non-ADSY students from our checkpoint to our cycle 1 data in mathematics. And I think that was a wonderful experience for our teachers to see the growth of their students. And also, it gives us a time to bridge the gap in the summertime and think outside the box on how we can engage in field experiences such as go to the Science Museum, go to the Children's Museum, because we are non-compulsory at that time, and we can work with our middle schools on how we can get those skills pushed down to our 5th grade students as we move forward for the next school year. So those are some of the benefits that we saw in the past and where we're going in the future.
Questions? Do you think this is something that you want just to help us through the pandemic, or is this something you would like to see every year from now on?
So my niece and my nephew, they went through a year-round school, and I saw the benefits of going through a year-round school. I think that over time, we'll be able to see the true benefits in about 2 or 3 years to see, you know, if it's cost efficient first, and will our data yield the benefits of being here for the additional days. Again, our ADSY students are outperforming our non-ADSY students in certain areas. And so I think in 2 or 3 years, we'll be able to say, yes, this is effective.
The comparable groups? Like, I'm just wondering, are the kids who show up early and have extra days of school, are they especially motivated to go to school, or their parents are, or are they just like the other kids, except they had more time?
I believe that they're motivated to come to school. I think they want to be at school. I think school is a safe haven for some of our students. And so for us to open up our doors early in the school year, they want to be there.
It sort of begs to, well, so now it's got me thinking that it might be nice to see the MAP, BOY, MOI data disaggregated by school in terms of different programs and initiatives we have at the schools. So the ADSY calendar, I suspect their data set looks very different from the general data set. And so I would wonder if there are other innovative programs that we're doing at individual schools where we're seeing really good ROI. And if we had that data separated out from what we just looked at, whether we can, you know, just really mark
What's working and
what
what's,
we need
yeah.
to do.
So Dr. Cobb she's probably already looked at that if I know her.
Yes, and she just walked back in. So one of the pieces that we have our research department track, and we code the students. So if the students, for example, the 21st Century After School Program, those students are coded, and we can track and disaggregate their data to show attendance, discipline, and student performance. So any group that we are interested in, so for example, right now, we're launching the tutoring program for specific students. They'll also be coded, and then we'll be able to pull that data to see if the tutoring that we're providing is making a difference. Dr. Cobb, do you want to add anything else? And then if we have anything that needs to be coded, definitely they can do that.
So the only thing I would add to that is that we also do program evaluations. We have the state required ones, but we also do just in time ROI. I think somebody said their ROI investigations to instructional services and products that we purchase to see if there's value in them. And it sounds like we're going to be very busy with all the new programs that we have. And to what Dr. Hinojosa is saying, yes, we are able to track students and in Eduphoria, which is where all of our assessment data is held. So if you are like one of our principals here, they want to look at their 21st, you don't have 21st century. But
Yes.
We do have,
Mhm.
we do, apologize. So if they have 21st century, they just want to look at the 21st century students, they're able to do that along with, just like you can, race, all the subpopulations that we're seeing here.
I mean, in this, like, as we're talking about equity, like, I don't want to give the impression that I think like we find this silver bullet and then we scale that up to everybody in the district. I really do think if we're tracking the students closely enough, we can figure out which kids would get the most benefit from whichever particular program we offer around the district to really maximize like how we're spending money and the bang we're getting for the buck.
Yeah, I think we've relied,
Go ahead, Dr.
I think we've relied on parent choice to place students. And we have seen some instances where the parents were more interested than the student was in the program they were being put in. So anyway, that's another challenge. But Dr. Cobb, we've been asking principals and teachers, what do you need today? If you had a magic wand, I love that question. Are you going to need more people? Are you going to need better software? Because, we're really interested in this.
So I will tell you we luckily with the T-class grant, we are getting a data fellow. So we are getting an additional staff member on my team. We definitely could use, could always use one more person. It's funny how, and I think we're not alone in this, is that the second you have a new member, they already have a half full plate and it increases more so. But if we want to pursue and go down that road of really looking at ROI and some more, our program evaluations are literally dissertations. They're over 100 pages long, but less in depth to that. I would think that would be the most immediate need as far as software and products and technology. That's all readily available to us. We're very good on that front. But we have the data fellow, so I think, and I'm also thinking of being economical at the same time, or being good stewards of our funds, is that we need the data fellow to get established, and then we can see what else we need from that point.
I know that when you present data to us, we all start coming up with interesting ideas and observations. But traditionally, I've always seen our economically disadvantaged students be in the absolute bottom of the group. And I kept seeing hopeful scores this time that you were presenting. I know you were looking at the students who are GT or extra languages and that sort of thing. But I'm seeing little really cause for hope in, among other things, that whatever's going on in the schools, they are really being successful with what has been historically a very hard group to be successful with.
And I'll brag on the larger team, the synergy that's happening between the superintendent of schools, the assistant superintendents of schools, my department, Dr. Paris's department in curriculum, Marie Mendoza in instructional services. I'll use Dr. Hinojosa's term, a flywheel happening, and you can feel less resistance to the crank, if that makes sense. That is what you are seeing right now. So for us, it feels like as long as we cannot have a COVID, not have a Harvey, we will be going, we are progressing forward in a more rapid pace than we have before.
I've heard people predict that we are now going to have a cyber warfare attack. So, and I was thinking when COVID came in, I thought, oh my gosh, this may actually last a whole month, you know? I'm thinking, you know, I just, you know, not even gonna predict this time.
Don't breathe life to it.
But
I want to say
I
that
do have to say, Mr. Ant, and you know, Mr. Miranda's here and Mr. Corman back there. We did have a meeting not too long ago to make sure that we were safe with our cybersecurity, and we are planning all angles, and it is a priority, and you'll see that moving forward in our budget, both the physical safety from Chief Colbert, but also the cyber safety. So we are doing both. But I do have to say, you know, just out loud to the team that's here tonight and those that can't be here tonight, our principals and central office, I tell you, we came back in January and circled the wagon, and we've agreed to go together because we will go far for our kids. And the entire team, I'd like to talk about that flywheel, but it starts with our schools, our teachers, our principals, our parents, and then central office, totally embracing this work. And we believe that we are seeing that flywheel moving, but most importantly, we believe in our kids. They deserve this, and our staff is giving it their best shot. You've got two principals that are here, you know, advocating for an additional day school calendar to provide more time for our kiddos, because they do deserve it. Our families deserve it, and our schools are the safe havens for them.
fantastic. Well, appreciate it. And we know that data-driven decisions are the key to success. And so when you get your fellow up and running and on board, and if you need additional support, because we do want ROI around programs, let us know so that can happen quickly.
Leave it to y'all.
So the action is for us to recommend.
On the calendar.
Yes.
On
Calendar
the
A.
22nd. And the recommendation is option A. Any questions, anybody? Thank you, Dr. Perez and Principal Cooper and Fisher. For our next item, I would like to recognize our Executive Chief of District Operations, Mark Miranda.
Thank you, President Durant. Superintendent, Dr. Hinojosa, and board members, we're on page 36 of your packet. This is Wells Middle School chiller replacement project. This is a chiller that's aged to the point where we have to do something about it. It's given us problems really going on 2 years now. Started off with some humidity issues and has just really progressed from there to the point where we are going to have to do something about it. And thankfully, we do have some bond funds to be able to handle this. And so this is for a complete chiller replacement. That's parts installation. It's 2 Carrier chillers. The parts and labor warranties, the pumps, the VFDs, and all things involved in replacing the chiller over at Wells Middle School. They're going to be very happy about this there. I'd be happy to entertain any questions about it.
I've never heard of a taco pump.
It's the name of the company, which is really funny because they do training. They do a lot of training too for HVAC, and it's taco training. It's kind of funny.
I will need this left off the consent agenda so that I can abstain from the vote. The contract seems to be one that went through Choice Partners. So I'll need to step out.
That's correct.
Understood. And so we will leave this agenda item off of the consent agenda for the 22nd. Thank you, Mr. Marion.
Thank you.
Our next item, I would like to recognize our General Counsel, Jeremy Brinkley.
Good evening. If you'll turn to page 46 with me, we have our second reading of Board Policy CDA Local regarding investment. The board did receive a thorough explanation of the recommended changes last month on first reading, and so I realize it's late. I will just ask if the board has any questions regarding the second reading.
We reviewed it last month and we've had a lot of time to sit with it. And so are there any additional questions? This is the second reading and I believe this can go on the consent
Yes, ma'am.
agenda for the 22nd. All right. Thank you, Mr. Brinkley.
Thank you.
For our next item, I would like to again recognize our Chief Financial Officer, Ann Whisper.
Thank you, President Durant, members of the board. On page 57 this evening is the beginning of our monthly list of taxpayer refunds. Yes, it is long. Yes, and so just wanted to check and see if there are any questions related to that item.
What does CoreLogic do?
It's a tax payment service. It's one of those that'll pay the taxes and then charge a fee. If there are no questions, then our next item is on page 61, and that's our monthly report of cooperative purchases that are over $50,000.
Actually, I did have a real quick question. Page 59. We had an overpayment with Greens Point Investors and Alamo Title Company, like $74,000, $53,000.
Yes. Now I was trying to get my notes in front of me about that one. My apologies, trustee Correa. In the midst of all my paper over here, I don't have it handy, but I will find it and ensure I get an answer to you.
Sure.
It's here. It's just in the middle of everything somewhere.
Okay.
But I'll circle back to that and make sure you get a response.
Any questions on the cooperative?
On page 61.
Are the lunch trays disposable?
They are disposable, those biodegradable lunch trays. And I check that expenditure each time because it's too high, but it's the real cost. Yes.
For the Mind Research Institute, what professional development services does that encompass?
Is Dr. Parasol still with us?
Mm-hmm.
Matt, do you want to answer that
curriculum and
question about
instruction.
the Mind Research?
It's part of our curriculum as he comes up, we'll share.
Yes, that is the parent company or parent organization actually to Eureka Math. And so that is, or actually not, that was Great Minds, sorry, ST Math, the parent company to ST Math. And so that is the professional development training and actually was funded through the T-class.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Parasol. And then the last item this evening is on page 49. And that's our independent auditors engagement letter for our external audit that's performed by Whitley Penn, which is a CPA firm that does the financial audit each year. And it's the engagement letter for the audit of the June 30, 2022 fiscal year end, that we kick off the audit process either at the end of April or the middle of May with the interim audit. And then the final portion of the audit takes place starting between about the end of August and goes through the end of September. So this is the engagement letter for this current fiscal year's annual audit.
And our findings?
We do not anticipate any, but we'll receive that report at the November board meeting.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
I know I've said this before, but I'll say it again. I've been to sessions at TASB where they say, do not keep hiring the same auditing firm all the time. However, with Whitley Penn, we get different investigators. So that is important on the safety of our financial situation. So I've always felt very comfortable with the Whitney Penn and how they handle everything.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll
They do.
echo that, just so that it's on record that somebody echoed it, that the risk is the sort of a moral hazard that happens when you have the same folks going through your books and developing close relationships with our folks. And so I feel comfortable with Whitley Penn too, for the reasons that Dr. Jensen just stated.
Thank you, Ms. Westbrooks.
Yes, ma'am. And I will make sure to get you a response, if not this evening via email. I'll get a response to you. I don't have my notes handy, so I can't respond to that right this moment. I apologize for that.
That's fine. And I was gonna ask, are we starting to feel, I guess, the creep up in costs with the supply chain issues that are going on?
Both the creep up in cost, but more so the delay in receiving items. We've had a lot of issues with that. It's the sourcing and making sure that we can get items in a timely fashion. But yes, some with the cost, but like I said, more so with the timing.
And that's good to hear. Okay. We do not have a closed session tonight. And there are no other items on tonight's agenda. So I will now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Madam President, I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
I second.
It's been moved by trustee Hodges and seconded by trustee Correa that we adjourn tonight's meeting. All those in favor, please raise your right hand. That motion carries unanimously. This meeting adjourns this evening at 9:02 p.m. Thank you, everybody.